One thing that I will always find interesting about video games is NPCs. Essentially just lines of code mixed with pixels formulated on the screen and added voice lines from paid actors on top, but in some way, some weird way, these fake, made up and entirely scripted pieces of computer code have a way of making you feel a wide assortment of emotions, from pride to desperation, anger, happiness, and above all, regret, despair, and misery. What gets me is when it comes to these characters in the medium of video games itself. See a book, a movie, they're completely different. In most cases, you're observing a change, seeing things happen to other people, or describing a scene. In books and even movies in some cases, you can have things happen in the first person, a perspective that is hard to put someone else in the shoes of. But even with that, you're still living out someone else's journey, seeing their emotions, their reactions of things. But in video games, especially first person ones, you're the one that must feel these emotions yourself. A true first person experience. I've especially found first-person shooters interesting, seeing as how 1 minute you're blasting away the baddies and having a boatload of fun, but on the next you're supposed to feel sadness, remorse, or satire in these non-playable characters. And I think for me, that's the most impressive thing of all. So how does all of that relate to a funny little cel-shaded RPG and all of its characters? Well, we'll find out, I guess. Yes, in today's video, as you probably saw from the title, we're going to be going through the full stories of every main non-playable character from the Borderlands series, starting in Borderlands 1 and making our way all the way through to the end of Borderlands 4. Now, just straight out of the gate, I'm just going to say that I won't be covering characters like Lilith, Brick, Claptrap, Roland, and other characters involved with them, as they are all playable characters in one way or another and have been covered in my Explaining All Vault Hunters video. So if you want to know absolutely everything there is to know about them, that video is out there waiting for you. This video itself is covering main NPCs, or non-playable characters that you meet along your little journeys in each game. This will be main ones, however, covering the people you are pretty much guaranteed to meet in the main story. One, because there are about 15,000 actual NPCs in the games without that, and two, 99% of them have nothing to say about them other than the mission that they hand out and their appearance. Also, I thought it might be a bit too obvious to include, but I thought I'd include it anyway just in case. Any NPC that later turns out to be an enemy, or any NPC that you can fight at any point after meeting them, will also not be on this list. People like Handsome Jack or General Knox, the Calypso twins, etc. are technically enemies that you will fight eventually, but they are NPCs that talk to you throughout the game. A lot of them are just voices you can hear in your head, much like Jack. He's just on your Echo device and then you meet him and then start shooting at him. He's not someone that gives you missions, talks to you around, everything like that, like he does in the pre-sequel. He is literally just an enemy at the end of the game, and the Calypso twins are very much similar, so they will not count. This is purely on just NPCs that talk to you, are always on your side, give you missions, or just have an involvement with the main story, and then you don't fight them at any point. Got it? Cool. Marcus Kincaid, usually just called Marcus, is the first NPC you ever meet in Borderlands, and one of the most enduring and instantly recognizable characters in the whole franchise. From the moment players first encounter his grizzled and sarcastic Slavic voice on the bus travelling far and wide on Pandora, it becomes immediately clear that Marcus is a character who exists to both ground and amuse. He's the archetypal arms dealer, but one with personality, wit, and longevity that few NPCs achieve. He's pragmatic, business-minded, selfish, double-headed, and according to Moxxi, a great lover. He somehow manages to embody both the humour and grim reality of life on Pandora. He's the guy who survives in a world defiled by bandits, alien monsters, and vault hunters. Not through raw power, but through cleverness, sheer wit, and a very profitable gun business. He's instantly recognisable thanks to his old USSR-style coat, his Slavic, presumed to be Russian accent, his round figure, gold tooth, white hair stripes, scruffy beard, and, of course, his laid-back attitude. He's introduced in the original Borderlands as a travelling gun vendor and arms dealer. You first encounter him during the opening cutscene of the game, offering a slight insight to the main protagonists of the playable characters, and Marcus himself. Little is explained in the actual game as to why Marcus is driving around 4 Vault Hunters in a dodgy looking dinged up bus, but the original Borderlands origin comic books may provide some insight. For some context, because these books have basically become lost media at this point, the Borderlands Origin comic books were a set of comics that came out in late 2012, just after Borderlands 2's release, with the first issue coming out on November 1st, 2012, and the last on February 1st, 2013. They briefly explain how the first 4 Vault Hunters came to all be on Marcus's bus at the start of Borderlands 1, and while some consider the comics non-canon to the overall Borderlands story, it can at least give us something to work with as to why and how Marcus ended up making his way into the story. In the case of Origins issue number 1, that being Roland, there seems to be no provided context for Marcus, with Roland simply waiting at a bus stop trying to escape a troubled past, and Marcus answering that call. It's unknown whether Roland actually knew about Marcus prior and what his business was, or whether he was just waiting for anyone or anything to hitch a ride from, but either way, he ended up on that bus. Issue 2, that being Lilith, involves Marcus directly. She's also trying to escape a past, but this time seemingly knows about Marcus and his bus service, as when he arrives at the bar Lilith was waiting at, is instantly recognised as the bus driver. She was, however, unaware of Marcus's arms dealing ventures, as when she finds out about this, she chastises him for involving himself in such a venture. He then says he'll tell her a story on the bus if she's willing to hear, to which she agrees. Issue number 3, being Mordecai, is very interesting, as it is Mordecai who initially approaches Marcus, as opposed to the opposite with Lilith. Being broken down in the middle of nowhere, Scooter is helping repair Marcus's bus, and hears 2 voices in the distance, one asking if any help was needed. Marcus is naturally hostile, whilst Scooter instantly focuses on the lady Mordecai is travelling with. Marcus shuts Scooter up and asks if they need a ride on his bus, describing it as a ride with opportunity. Mordecai refuses the offer, but Marcus insists that he takes a business card. This provides us with some key context and shows us that Marcus actually owns his own bus company and is keen to show people they can be good or turn their life around, and constantly goes on about opportunity and adventure. Mordecai once again continues at the behest of the lady he's travelling with, but once it turns out he was run straight into a trap, him and Bloodwing deal with the problem, then presumably take up Marcus's offer. The close-up of the card that was given to Mordecai from Marcus seems to show that Marcus was specifically looking for Vault Hunters, as it says, Marcus Kincaid's bus to opportunity, the world needs Vault Hunters. Interesting. The way that Mordecai meets Marcus seems to show that he was convinced to become a Vault Hunter, rather than him coming to Pandora for that specific purpose. But this is why a lot of people don't see these comics as canon. Why would Marcus be looking for Vault Hunters specifically? What does he gain by doing this? Why is he going around on a bus looking for them? And why does he literally kick them all off the same bus at Firestone just to drive off and only see them in person again weeks later at New Haven? Not saying anything of note to them and then moving straight back into a gun selling business kind of just comes off as like, you're doing this business wrong, brother. Why are you just leaving them there? It kind of makes no sense, and the more you think about why Marcus even pops up in the beginning in the first place, the less it makes sense, especially with the comic books added on top of that. Issue 4 of the comics, Brick, doesn't help this at all, as he's literally just walking across the desert with a pack on his back. The bus just happens to drive past and then stops for him, and Marcus invites him on. He just sort of gets on. The other Vault Hunters are already there and ask what his name and story is, but other than that, nothing. Much like Roland, it seems Brick was just trying to escape whatever life he had previously and will take any avenue to get it. But at least in Roland's case, it doesn't provide any evidence as to whether he knew about Marcus in Vault Hunting, but for Brick, it's literally just chance that the bus drove past and picked him up. Did he have any idea what the hell was going on, who any of these people were? We don't know. I know it seems like we're kind of going off topic with this about Marcus, but this whole comic section was just to point out that you should take the comics with a slight grain of salt to the actual story of Marcus himself, but this is really all we have to work with when it comes to the first time we see him in the franchise, and any context to add to that is good context, even if they're technically not canon in some people's heads. It's very confusing. Marcus's main role is selling guns, ammunition, and eventually STU upgrades to Vault Hunters who have just stepped, jumped, or been blown up into the Borderlands. His arms dealing business immediately communicates the vibe of the entire Borderlands universe. You can literally buy a gun from a vending machine, place Japan, etc.
Why don't we explore some together? Man, they're selling all kinds of crazy items. Oh, that's so crazy.
In the first game particularly, Marcus doesn't just sell guns, he advocates for the brands that he's selling, offering witty commentary, advertising brands like Dahl and SNS like he's reading off some corporate script, and coming off as slightly more serious in his role as an arms dealer. It's worth noting though that the dialogue about the brands he's selling isn't just pure audio jank to sell immersion about the game, but genuine advice. Listening for just a few lines will tell you things about specific brands that are barely mentioned outside of his machines. This means he's basically giving you a slight tutorial on how things work, without taking you out of the world entirely, something that can be extremely hard to implement in games. It's also worth noting that Marcus is actually the first voice that you hear in pretty much every single Borderlands game, providing the first few paragraphs of dialogue needed to open up the game's events to people, and provide a bit more context to what is actually going on. This dialogue is all joined together by the now very iconic sketch-style drawings, which seem to be on some sort of yellow treasure map-style canvas, black paint being used to bring his explanations to life. The way it's laid out gives the credence to this being Marcus not only voicing but also making these sketches, providing a double layer to the way these stories are introduced to the players. During the events of the first game, Marcus takes on a pretty vague role, contrasted quite a lot by how he's portrayed in future. He was once theorised to be a part of either Dahl or the Atlas Corporation long before deciding to move his arms dealing venture to Pandora as a sole effort, taking on the role as the planet's monopoly weapons supplier. Initially being the only supplier for Pandora, this means he knows who, but more importantly, who isn't buying from him. This made him extremely skeptical of an Iridian archaeological scientist called Patricia Tannis. It's hinted at that when Marcus first travelled to Pandora, he would sell things like food and basic survival supplies for the residents of the planet, and not just weapons. Tannis never seemed to buy anything from him, however, yet remained on the planet for months on end, seemingly without any sort of food or basic survival equipment. This gave him the impression that she was being provided off-world support, and Marcus, being a very self-driven businessman, didn't take kindly to that at all. Marcus himself lived in New Haven and frequently travelled the planet to install and maintain the many weapons machines that are scattered all over. As I said before, it's kind of unknown why he was riding around in a bus, picking up and dropping off Vault Hunters when he had no business doing so. Whether you go by the comics I talked about, that he was picking up Vault Hunters specifically because he knows he earns good business from them, or whether he is simply moving around and installing and repairing said gun machines, and is a good side hustle for him. One Reddit theory I saw does provide a little bit more of a reasonable story for why Marcus does this, and I do think it's the most logical. Quote, "It's another job. He started his weapons business on Pandora, but after Dahl flew the coop, it was slim pickings for constant new customers. He plays all sides, so he comes out on top. Vault Hunters, thanks to Typhon, are a kind of niche but growing profession in the Borderlands, so being the guy to bring them to areas to do business is part of it. Imagine you're him. Have a problem with bandits not paying you back or something? What a better way to get yours than bussing in a load of bloodthirsty treasure hunters." End quote. Having Marcus literally drop off these relentless gunslingers, which he views as walking jackpots off wherever there's trouble, will pretty much guarantee business, so I kinda see why this theory has credence. But again, just a theory. After some time had passed, Marcus set up a weapon shop in T-Bone Junction, an old hub of the Atlas Corporation, and involves himself with business involving Atlas, half proving he has at least some past with the company. He most notably purchases the Crimson Armory after its destruction and death of General Knox. It's also at this time revealed that Moxxi and Marcus actually had a romantic past, with Marcus being Moxxi's third husband, number 1 being Jimbo Hodunk, and number 2 being Mr. Shank. They famously have a family portrait together, with both of Moxxi's children, Scooter and Ellie, appearing as children in it. Neither of them are Marcus's, however, with them pretty much being confirmed as Jimbo Hodunk's children. Side note, but Moxxi must move on hella fast from relationships, considering Ellie and Scooter look no older than like 9 or 8 in this portrait, and she got married twice in at least that amount of time. Damn. Though having a shop in T-Bone Junction, his permanent place of residence was still confirmed to be New Haven for quite a while, remaining there till the Hyperion occupation of Pandora. During this time, Wilhelm, a mercenary hired by Hyperion, obliterated the town and forced Marcus to relocate to Sanctuary, at both the request but reluctancy of Roland. Roland, while acknowledging Marcus's aid and knowing him both professional and personally, distrusted him and his questionable ethics. This is due to the fact that he provided continuous weapon supply to a large clan of bandits camped out at the Dahl Memorial Dam. Knowing Roland was later abducted by the same bandits didn't really help Roland's dismissal of Marcus's shady business ventures, but allowed him to continue staying inside of Sanctuary despite that. In Sanctuary itself, Marcus once again ran the gun vending machines and helped any Vault Hunter with equipment that they may have needed for the journey ahead. In conjunction with this, he set up his own gun range, allowing the residences of Sanctuary to test out any weapons they buy or come across, even providing special training classes for anyone who wanted to learn about weapon elements, using questionable targets. His character doesn't change drastically from the first game to the second personality-wise, but you see a slightly older, more experienced version of him.
I don't know. Looks like it works to me.
He's still sarcastic, still sells guns, still jokes about how insane Pandora is, and still functions as the reliable arms-dealing Russian we'd all come to expect at this point, but ditches his, at least public suspicion of Patricia Tannis and his past connections with Dahl and Atlas, focusing on more local conflicts, such as bandits or personal connections to characters in Sanctuary itself. After the defeat of Handsome Jack, Marcus stayed in Sanctuary for the foreseeable future, only venturing astray for Dahl's mercenary day. He made his way to the flash-frozen part of Pandora and to the town of Gingerton to look for a weapons shipment that had gone missing a few days prior, and enlists the help of the Vault Hunters to find it. After it was discovered and the culprit behind its disappearance was promptly defeated, Marcus decided, in his goodwill, to gift the rescued gun shipment to the people of Gingerton and the Vault Hunters on the house. Though it is worth noting he was initially going to cut and run and steal the gun shipment back from the people who bought it, but yeah, he still did something charitable, I guess. Marcus returned to Sanctuary after this for a while, but was seemingly absent when the town was invaded by Hector and his army. Turns out, he was hiding in some sort of secret bunker alongside Crazy Earl, a venture which he soon started to regret, as it was making him slightly crazy himself. After asking the Vault Hunters to provide him with some food that Earl seemingly forgot to pack inside, Earl pleaded with the Vault Hunters to get Marcus out of there, as he hates this little wet pants crybaby. After beating up and breaking one of Marcus's vending machines, he finally decides to come out, saying the place smelled like cat pee and he was quite relieved to leave. After this, he seemed to disappear for a while, with no one really knowing where he went. It turns out that Marcus had discovered that Atlas had sabotaged its own weapons with bricking software, rendering them useless, and planned to offload them onto unsuspecting bandits all across Pandora. Reese later approached him offering a partnership, but Marcus declined, convinced that Atlas could never recover. However, once Reese succeeded in restoring the company, Marcus relented, and the two entered into an uneasy alliance, leading into Borderlands 3. During Borderlands 3 itself, Marcus pretty much stays on the newly built Sanctuary 3 for the entire game. It is worth noting though that he drops off the newly venturing Vault Hunters at the bus station where Claptrap first meets them, much like he did all those years ago with Roland, Lilith, Mordecai and Brick. This time he fully states that he'd hate to lose a new customer, pretty much confirming why he does these types of drop-offs for new Vault Hunters and adventurers all across Pandora. I mean, if we're being real here, this was only included to be a reference to the first game, you know, Marcus dropping everyone off and Claptrap greeting them, but lore is lore. Other than that, he's quite sedentary, mainly giving out missions to the Vault Hunters aboard Sanctuary and providing SDU slots for anyone who may need it. The new Marcus gun shop in Sanctuary 3 also happens to include a firing range, slightly out of the way compared to the one in Sanctuary 1, but a lot more advanced than the previous, this time having a portrait of Handsome Jack as the target as opposed to living things. And that's really all we know on the story of Marcus up until now. He doesn't really appear at any point as a key figure in the main story moving forward, and only remains as the owner of his gun and ammo vending machine businesses, as well as any other ventures he's dealing with outside of that. After Sanctuary 3 is brought down on the planet of Kairos, Marcus, along with most of the Crimson Raiders, is nowhere to be found. It's unknown as to whether he's on the planet somewhere or travelled off-world for business and never returned. Zane, an ex-Vault Hunter, has weirdly seemed to have taken over the dialogue part of Marcus's machines, so perhaps Marcus passed on over some of the responsibility of his company to Zane and is off on some other ventures because of that. But alas, it's truly unknown what he's actually doing, and as of now, we are yet to find out. Marcus is easily one of the most memorable NPCs in the Borderlands series. If Dr. Zed is the shady practitioner without a med school degree everyone fears to be operated on by, Marcus is the sarcastic gun salesman everyone actually depends on, doesn't truly trust, but knows he can be a valuable asset. Purely because he sells guns. While most characters in Pandora are over the top or completely absurd, Marcus kind of feels grounded. He can come across as very selfish in his ventures. He's genuine first, businessman second, and comic relief third. He takes no shit from people, frequently brushing off criticism and punishing anyone who dare take the money out of his pocket, whether that's his millionth customer or a local citizen in Sanctuary asking for a refund and getting his shit blown schmoove off. He has no qualms or morals about doing shady business practices and often makes gun deals with groups that are opposing the people around him and their way of life, such as the bandit camps all over Pandora. When it comes down to it, however, somewhere deep down, he does genuinely care about the people that surround him, even if he rarely or ever actually says it out loud, whether that be the Vault Hunters, Roland, or even Moxxi. I think that's interesting and definitely adds a lot of depth and nuance to his character. Something that can be said is very rare in the Borderlands universe. Most NPCs just say exactly what they're thinking out loud and trying to be funny, and it can be read very easily. Marcus, though, he's a bit of a tougher nut to crack. Marcus's dialogue often reflects his view of Pandora as purely a business opportunity, a dangerous one, but an opportunity nevertheless. He jokes about Vault Hunters dying all the time, about losing shipments, about crazy things happening all around him, but does occasionally slip in genuine words of advice or otherwise out-of-character lines that kind of catch you off guard. In other words, he's sarcastic but doesn't sugarcoat any situation. His humour often comes from pointing out the absurdity of the situation without really ever being part of it himself. I mean, think about it. Unlike most memorable NPCs, and pretty much all main NPCs in Borderlands, Marcus pretty much never involves himself directly in the main story at all. He's much like Zed in this regard. He has his own problems and businesses to deal with, and considering both him and Zed have very similar ventures in the vending machines, it kinda makes sense. He is never there making large decisions, he's just sort of chilling on the sidelines waiting for something to happen. This separates the type of character he is from people like Tannis and Hammerlock, for example, with them having a much more of an involved part in the overall Borderlands narrative. The fact that Marcus doesn't really involve himself with much going-ons that happen within the main story, in pretty much every Borderlands game, or is anywhere near any of the events that happen, prompts me to think about a very interesting theory about him. Look at me like I'm crazy, I don't really care. But have you ever thought to yourself, how does he know so much? Why does he introduce the story of each game to us? How does he introduce the story of each game to us? How does he know all of that information? He's never involved in these events, conversations and confrontations, really. How does he know to draw such detailed sketches about things he's never even seen nor been told about? In the intro itself. I was thinking about this to myself yesterday and I thought, I mean, it would have made sense if it was someone like Lilith telling us about the intros to all the stories. I mean, she was literally a main character in the first game, so she knew like every key detail that happened. She was directly involved in Borderlands 2 and was pretty much always in the room when something important to do with the main story was being discussed. She knew what the Vault of the Warrior looked like, she saw the other vaults on the map at the end of the game, she was the only one who actually led the Crimson Raiders in the third game, and pretty much always made the decisions, and hell, she was even on Elpis during the events of the pre-sequel, and definitely could have relayed the story of what happened to us. But Marcus? He's the one telling us all this. He's the one constantly asking if you want to hear a story. He just so happens to drop the first 4 Vault Hunters off at the exact point the first game unwinds from. He just so happens to provide tons of guns and ammunition for the player, the most important thing in a RPG gun game. Frequently flaunts about his guns, and he's one of the only mainline NPCs to pretty much never appear in a main game cutscene or is anywhere near any decision that's made. So how does he know so much, yet is around for so little of it? Why does he have countless portraits of his family ancestry scattered all around the world? Need we also forget about his father, the person who was originally telling him all these stories and legends about Vault Hunters, even in his dying breath, Marcus says. I know people were talking about the Vault, but dying breath? Maybe that's the reason why Marcus believes in all of this so much, and maybe that's the reason why we get to experience it. It's just something he heard as a child, and he's just passed that story down to us now. His father passed it to him, and now we're experiencing that story too. To me, all this sounds like the product of someone who has constructed a universe, a story, a made-up tale, and is purely acting as a self-insert inside of it. What if Borderlands isn't real? It's a tale, a campfire story, a book read to his grandchildren, and he's the author of it. I'll let you sit on that. The main takeaway is that Marcus is memorable because he's a complicated and not easily read character in a world full of surface level predictable ones. He's funny without being obnoxious, practical without being boring, and takes the morally ambiguous road, even when he faces harsh criticism from the people around him. He's also a reminder that not every single character needs some dramatic backstory or superpowers to be important. Some characters are really just important because they make the world feel lived in. Not every conflict or situation is black or white, and Marcus to me is the dirty shade of grey in between it, which I think is sorely needed in the Borderlands universe as of recent. Having goodie versus baddie doesn't always hit for me. You do need someone who's a little bit of both, doesn't have trouble exploring that, and actually makes engaging with them interesting. It's the reason Jack was so loved, and it's a shame they've sort of pushed Marcus down the hole, doesn't say much of anything with any substance category, and even when he does, it just seems like he's the guy with the funny Russian accent, not the shady businessman who had secret relations with mega corporations and bandit camps and made conspiracies about other people's ventures. Such as Tannis, he's not been explored anywhere near as much as he should have been by now, and that kind of makes me very disappointed. Either way though, I do love Marcus, and I'm sure he'll be waiting to tell me another story very soon. Dr. Zed Blanco, being just better known as Dr. Zed, is the second human NPC you meet in the Borderlands franchise, being the player's introduction to the town of Firestone, how meds and shields work, and shows off Zed's vending machine, something that the player would use frequently throughout their time on Pandora. Dr. Zed is first introduced in the original Borderlands as the proprietor of the makeshift medical bay in the settlement of Firestone. His appearance and behaviour quickly established the core components of his character and the drab, worn down and almost crude nature of the planet Pandora itself. He wears a used but somewhat modern looking medical outfit. He wears a light blue but completely blood-soaked apron, adorned with 6 straps keeping it all together, 2 of which are attached to some sort of shoulder pad. There's one pocket at the bottom with what looks like to be a hip flask in, which is also covered in blood, but I guarantee he doesn't give one fuck. He has on a pair of normal looking trousers and boots, a pair of medical gloves, a long sleeve shirt with the sleeves seemingly rolled up, and a red medical strap on the left arm, a face mask because contamination, mostly black hair with the exception of the 2 white stripes on each side, and to tie it all up, a lovely looking name tag that says, "My name is Dr. Zed." His face is hidden behind a surgical mask, meaning no one truly knows what he looks like. However, leaked concept art for what was going to originally be Roland's character seemingly looked like Zed, with his iconic grey hair on the side of his head. Despite the grim visuals, Zed's demeanour is upbeat, casual, and often joyful, as though nothing about his grisly surroundings or questionable medical practices is particularly concerning. Dr. Zed's personality is defined by contradictions. On one hand, he is a healer, or at least the closest Pandora has to one. He patches up mercenaries, settlers, and bounty hunters who stumble into his shop, riddled with bullet holes or bitten by alien fauna, and sells healing items, upgrades, and medical supplies through the franchise's characteristic vending machines. He cares about the survival of communities like Firestone and Sanctuary, and often assists the Vault Hunters by providing quests or basic support. Despite all of this, he doesn't actually have any medical license, meaning everything he does can be questionable at least. Because of this lack of medical license, Zed is also deeply unethical. He performs unlicensed surgeries, conducts unauthorized medical experiments, and has a cavalier attitude towards patient safety. Many of his quests in both Borderlands 1 and 2 revolve around an off-key, under-the-table request, collecting body parts, retrieving experimental organs, dealing with escaped test subjects, or cleaning up after questionable surgical mishaps. The series frequently hints that Zed actually lost his medical license, as opposed to never having one in the first place, though the exact details are shrouded in mystery. Depending on the source, he either violated medical ethics so severely that even Pandora's lax standards couldn't tolerate him, or he lost it for petty reasons that may have had little to do with his notorious conduct. The ambiguity of this is entirely in tune with the franchise's bleak humour. Zed is simultaneously too reckless to be trusted around patients, yet too valuable to be kicked out of any settlement he manages to stumble into. His tone of voice is also cheerful and enthusiastic, bordering on detached. He speaks to the Vault Hunters as if they are regular patients or neighbours, rarely acknowledging the extreme violence that surrounds them. I mean, the fact that he causes a lot of violence himself, and that he has most likely seen too much to count in his time, especially on Pandora, it kinda makes sense. Zed seemingly lived in and around Firestone for God knows how long before the first 4 Vault Hunters arrived on the bus. It seems he's been around a while, as the town looked as though it had quite a large population, with him being one of them long before the bandits around the area took over and murdered everyone. The only reason Zed is kept alive in Firestone when everyone else is murdered is because of his extensive medical background, with him being able to patch the bandits up if and when they needed attention after accidentally shooting each other in the legs. After the Vault Hunters take care of the bandit problem in the area, Zed sticks around, staying in Firestone for the foreseeable. The only theorized reason I have is purely because he had nowhere else to go. He only leaves for good after the 4 Vault Hunters contact him about New Haven and its established populace. If it wasn't for the Vault Hunters actually contacting him about New Haven, he might have just stayed in Firestone, and then when Hyperion took over, he could have very likely been killed. Zed's clinic reflects the improvisational, scavenged aesthetic that defines Pandora. Everything looks rusty, patched together or repurposed from industrial waste. His workspace seems more like a butcher shop crossed with a mechanic's garage than a medical facility. Although Zed doesn't play a major part in the overreaching storyline in Borderlands 1, his presence helps humanize the settlement of Firestone. Characters like him give a setting sense of lived-in strangeness and emphasize that life continues on the margins of chaos, even when colossal alien artifacts and megacorporations loom overhead. In Borderlands 2, Dr. Zed is still alive and active, though due to Hyperion's influence and other narrative choices, he's relocated from New Haven to Sanctuary and appears less prominently than in the first game. Zed operates a small clinic in an old doll mining town called Sanctuary, selling medical supplies and upgrades, having moved from his previous home of New Haven, which was attacked and taken over by Hyperion, being wiped out entirely by Wilhelm. Zed's vending machines return, reaffirming his franchise-wide role as Pandora's most accessible medic, this time equipped with a much wider range of supplies. The Hyperion Corporation has further outlawed unlicensed medical practice, meaning Zed must hide or disguise certain elements of his work. This dynamic provides some of his most humorous lines and interactions. Due to his lack of a medical license still, Zed ends up operating tons of wacky and ethically moral experiments, from trying to rip shards of unrefined iridium out of lunatics that think it will give them superpowers, to stitching a bunch of animals together in hopes of creating a new species. He also ends up beefing with a long-standing rival that operates in Three Horns Valley, known as Dr. Doc Mercy, being just referred to as Doc Mercy. This is due to the fact that he's causing a ton of patients to end up at Zed's door, and the fact that Doc Mercy actually has a medical license, something that Zed is extremely jealous of, but also confused how he got it in the first place. He and the Vault Hunters actually managed to discover a new type of Hyperion technology called E-Tech, before explaining that the medically sound conclusion to the logical experiments that he made the Vault Hunters commit to is that, and I quote, E-Tech is friggin' dope, which shows the extensive medical background he has to a T. He, much like everyone else in Sanctuary, later moves to the back burner after the events of the second game, Jack's defeat, the fall of Helios, and the introduction of Hector in the Fight for Sanctuary DLC. His clinic is unfortunately gone, with Zed now operating from a makeshift lab made out of old pieces of the Helios space station and bits and bobs that have been salvaged from around the area. Nothing crazy, but looks to be enough to keep everyone up to scratch. He seemingly had a crush on Tannis here, mentioning her a few times and asking if she even knows he exists. He tries a few more experiments in the back burner with the Vault Hunters in a bid to impress her, seemingly working. It's unknown if anything ever came of this transaction between them, but Tannis is in charge of the infirmary in Borderlands 3, suggesting they may have practiced together at some point. Zed also mentions trying to get back his medical license, something we know he actually does try to do in the future after the events of the Lilith DLC. In Borderlands 3, Dr. Zed does not appear directly, which disappointed some longtime fans, me included. The lore implies that he's still active somewhere, trying to get his medical license back, but it's never confirmed by him or anyone else in the actual game itself. Only a few ads on the radio even confirm he's still alive, with him advertising his Zed's meds machines. The decision to not feature him in the main story stems from narrative shift towards new planets, new factions, and different characters. However, the continued presence of his medical brand serves as a subtle acknowledgement of his long-standing role in the franchise. Why not have someone else take the role like what happened in the pre-sequel with Nurse Nina? Why even acknowledge him in that way if he never even appears in the game? This isn't actually a theory or anything, but much a reality of life. Pure voice actor problems. In the case of someone like Claptrap, he's too important to straight up just remove, or at least remove from a game almost entirely. He's too fundamental to the franchise, is seen everywhere and basically is the face of it. So when his voice actor was done dirty by Gearbox, they needed a replacement. But in the case of Dr. Zed, they're probably safer to keep the same guy as much as possible, but only enough so you know he still exists, nothing more. Zed's voice actor Rick Spiegel was unavailable for VA work when Borderlands 3 was in development. Personal issues were all that were listed, but it has been pretty widely discussed since then that he had unfortunately developed a type of throat cancer, which not only sucks in general, but especially for someone who does voice work as her actual job. Thankfully, he has since recovered. Gearbox themselves even said they didn't want to recast out of genuine respect, and they plan to use him for future projects once he was better. For Borderlands 3, they just used what little voice lines they did have of him, either that weren't used in previous games or were recorded very early on in development, and then used them on the vending machines and radio ads. Borderlands 4 is a bit more of an obvious one why he doesn't appear, but that's pretty simple to deduce. I mean, number one, he wasn't with the Crimson Raiders or even anywhere near Sanctuary when it crash landed, but also because even half the people who were actually on Sanctuary at the end of the third game just don't appear in Borderlands 4. Zed's machines are here, however, providing the same type of service that all Zed's meds machines all across the galaxy do. This provides really good information that Zed does have a monopoly of some kind when it comes down to the medical vendors, as even this far away from Pandora, Zed is still the main medical supplier. Even if he's nowhere to be seen, he still provides everything to do with medical stuff. He provides a few lines of dialogue when you access one of his machines, meaning that his voice actor Rick Spiegel is seemingly back for good, hopefully meaning that Dr. Zed will play a larger role in future Borderlands content. Brothers? Yeah. Brothers. After the events of the first game, the Vault Hunters make their way over to the Jacob's Cove to deal with a large undead problem, and it's revealed that Dr. Zed actually has a twin brother, Dr. Ned. However, it is a contentious subject as to whether Dr. Ned is actually 1. Dr. Zed's actual brother, and 2. actually real. It's theorized and also heavily insinuated in the DLC itself that Ned is really just Zed, but with a terrible and shoddy disguise in the way of a mustache, with even the medical vendors all across the island having an N taped over Zed's name with a mustache placed on top of his face. You would think it's all but confirmed then. Ned is Zed. But it's not that simple. Of course it's not. A Game of the Year edition guide from Brady Games states that he is indeed the evil twin brother of Firestone practitioner Dr. Zed. Now, I couldn't actually find the guide online. Lord knows I tried. There's only physical versions that exist, and most of them are sold out. But I found the original version of the Brady Games guide for the entirety of Borderlands 1, and it's pretty comprehensive, to be honest, and it's worth looking through if you're a big fan of Borderlands, and I definitely should have used it for my All Enemies video, because it includes literally everything. But that's for the original game, and the only thing it actually has on the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned is kind of like a promotion for it, considering this was just when Borderlands 1 had come out, none of the DLC had come out yet. I have seen a screenshot somewhere ages ago, but this is literally like lost media. Unless someone's got a physical copy, then there's no way I can show it off. Also, in the behind the scenes trailer for the first game, where Claptrap shows the audience around, Zed and Ned are both seen with each other at the same time, walking around. So, which is it? Well, it could technically be any reason. It's pretty well known at this point that the DLCs for Borderlands 1 are all over the place when it comes down to lore, continuity, and which parts of them are actually real or just never mentioned again. And it's extremely annoying for someone like me to have to talk about it, sifting through stuff and having to mention that, oh yeah, this isn't true by the way, this isn't canon, but the thing that happened 5 minutes ago, yeah, that is. The only DLCs that are considered 100% real through and through from Borderlands 1 is Moxxi's Underdome and the Secret Armory of General Knox. The events of the Underdome are mentioned enough after the fact by both Moxxi and Mordecai in multiple different games to confirm it actually happened, and that Mordecai won it all. When it comes to the Knox DLC, entire chunks of Tales from the Borderlands and Athena's whole story confirm it to have most definitely happened, even if, after Tales, it's barely ever given a second thought, as most of the OG Borderlands stuff is nowadays, unfortunately. But when it comes to the Zombie Island of Dr. Ned, and especially Claptrap's Robot Revolution, it's all a bit here or there, fuzzy and backwards. The Robo Revolution has its own separate thing, but Ned's DLC is confusing, and if you've played it, you'll know what I mean. Ned dies a total of 3 separate times in Borderlands 1. 3 separate times. Once as Ned, once as Undead Ned, and then one more time as Undead Ned Trap. And unless you believe in divine Zed intervention, there is no way that Dr. Zed could possibly be Ned, but also there's no way that Ned could die 3 times. I mean, the first death makes sense, right? A guy dies. Bullets are known to do that. Then Undead Ned, bit far-fetched, but also he's a doctor who made a zombie virus in a DLC about undead stuff like zombies and werewolves, so it's not impossible he made a much stronger version for himself and then you go and kill him and he dies a second time. But Ned Trap? Now, this one is a bit difficult. I'm convinced that this DLC was just a story that Claptrap told the Vault Hunters he wished they went on, and then they just imagined what would happen. Because like every villain in this DLC is brought back from the dead. There's a million Claptraps running around with guns and swords and boxing gloves, and he literally murders Marcus. The fact that Claptrap also sees the final boss of the game, the Minac, in his consciousness in the pre-sequel tells me he believes it, but it never actually happened. So, Ned Trap, not actually possible, but was still killed in his own DLC twice. So, is that DLC not canon either? Was it all a ruse? Or is he just a different person to Zed? We'll never know, so take your best guess. Dr. Zed and Dr. Ned are also theorized to have a third sibling, Dr. Ted, but he's only mentioned like one time in a Headhunter pack where you visit a long-dead TK Baha in TK Baha's Bloody Harvest. He mentions that Dr. Zed and Dr. Ned have a third brother named Ted, but they aren't allowed to talk about him for he is considered the Forbidden Brother. As far as I'm concerned, this is extremely non-canon. I mean, we are literally told by a guy who is long dead in a Halloween world. So, yeah. One of the core reasons Dr. Zed is memorable to me is the pure contrast that he has between his cheerful attitude and the gruesome reality of his work. He belongs to the tradition of comedic characters who are unaware, unbothered, or unconcerned about the disturbance they cause. Much of Borderlands' humour depends on the absurdity of extreme violence presented very casually, and Zed is one of the best people in the franchise to portray that type of person. Things like him saying, "close enough," when you make a Hyperion spy literally explode after hitting him, directly after Zed told you to be careful and make a tiny incision, is a true encapsulation of this guy's character. Zed serves as a parody of the classic RPG healer trope. Instead of some noble cleric or some wise surgeon, Borderlands gives the player a doctor who would most likely fail every single medical test, lose his certification immediately, say he got an A for effort anyway, and then proceed to literally stitch multiple species of animal together for science. Yet, the franchise never frames Zed as malicious or ill-mannered. Not as desperate, not a villain, nor does he operate out of cruelty. His questionable practices stem from a mixture of improvisation, scientific curiosity, desperation, and genuine intrigue as how to what he is doing will help other people. Mostly. In a world with limited resources, where hospitals and infrastructure have long since broken down, Zed is doing the best he can, albeit in ways which would horrify anyone from a more stable society. He never operates selfishly. He stayed behind in Firestone to help anyone who came back, much to his own detriment. He tried to invent a cure for Hector's virus all by himself. He felt true emotion when he heard of Roland's passing, and in a world full of rage, pain, and death, he tried to offer the opposite, and even still now is trying to get back a medical license to only better that still. He may not be the best example of a doctor, but he's the most memorable one for sure. But in other, more simple words, Zed's friggin' dope. At first glance, Angel didn't seem like she'd become one of the most important characters in all of Borderlands. The first time we were introduced to her, she mostly acts as a mysterious voice guiding the Vault Hunters through Pandora. She appears through blue holograms, gives advice, warns the Vault Hunters about danger, and pushes the story forward. Early on, she almost feels like your standard, "you need to do this" character, coming off as kind of a knockoff Cortana from Halo, a mysterious blue hologram woman in your head. Sounds about right. But as the series continues, especially in Borderlands 2 and parts of Borderlands 3, it becomes clear that Angel was much more than that. She ends up being one of the most tragic figures in the entire franchise, and her story becomes deeply connected to nearly every major event in the Borderlands universe. Angel has one of the most recognisable designs in the Borderlands series, even though players don't physically meet her up until Borderlands 2. For most of the first game, she only appears as a glowing blue hologram projected in front of the player, but when you meet her in Borderlands 2, you can actually see what she looks like. She has pale skin, dark Skrillex-style hair, glowing blue eyes, and the glowing siren tattoos that run all across her body. Those tattoos are one of the defining traits of sirens in the Borderlands universe. Sirens are incredibly rare women born with supernatural powers connected to mysterious alien energy and Iridian technology. Every siren has glowing tattoos somewhere on their body, and Angel's are especially bright because of how powerful she is. Angel's specific ability is technopathy, otherwise known as phase shift. Basically, she can control and communicate with technology using her mind. She can hack systems instantly, control machines remotely, access communications, manipulate digital networks, and interact with technology over huge distances. Hyperion uses her powers to manage their systems, monitor enemies, and most importantly, charge the Vault Key. Her design immediately makes her look different from everyone else around her. Most characters in Borderlands look dirty, chaotic, and aggressive because Pandora and the general universe itself is such a violent place. Angel, on the other hand, looks almost ghost-like, clean, glowing, calm, and strangely disconnected from the world around her. That feeling actually becomes stronger when you find out where she's being kept in Borderlands 2. Instead of living freely, Angel is trapped inside a massive Hyperion facility, connected to huge machines and life support systems. Tubes and cables surround her body while machines constantly drain her power, making her act sort of like a catalyst for the Vault Key. She looks exhausted and fragile despite being one of the strongest sirens in the entire series. Now, initially this would seem like a gift for handsome Jack. Well, just Jack at the time. Like most sirens, Angel's powers were discovered when she was still but a small child. Not being able to properly control them, however, due to the fact that they were relatively new, she was so young and had no one to mentor her, accidentally caused the death of her own mother and Jack's wife. That moment completely changed the course of her and Jack's life. Jack truly goes off the rails after this, locking up Angel because of what she did to her mother, saying it's for her own good. Instead of helping Angel learn to control her powers in a healthy way, Jack became obsessed with containing her. At first, he likely believed it was protecting her, but over time, this protection slowly turned into eternal imprisonment. Eventually, Angel stopped being treated like a daughter anymore and started becoming a resource. That idea becomes the entire core tragedy of her story. In the original Borderlands, Angel serves as a player's guide throughout most of the game. She contacts the Vault Hunters through holograms and helps direct them towards the vault. At first, she seems trustworthy. She warns players about dangerous situations, gives useful information, and acts like someone genuinely trying to help. But there's always something slightly strange about her. She knows too much, she appears unexpectedly, and sometimes it feels like she's guiding events rather than simply observing them. Also, why is she helping you? She never really explains, just sort of tells you to do something and you kinda do it. By the end of the game, it becomes clear that Angel is tied to the larger corporate interests involving the Vault. Players begin to realise she isn't just some random helper, she's somehow connected to Hyperion and the growing conflict surrounding Pandora's alien secrets. Still, even in the first game, Angel never feels openly evil. Instead, conflicted. That's what makes her really interesting. Even before players know her full story, there's a sense that she's trapped in a situation she doesn't fully control, but also because you don't really know much about her, makes her a very interesting character. At the time, most players probably didn't even realise how tragic her situation really was, and also the fact that nobody knew who Jack was, didn't really know how to connect her to Hyperion. Angel's relationship with Handsome Jack and Hyperion is easily the most important part of her story. Jack is one of the most famous villains in gaming history. He's funny, charismatic, intelligent, and horrifying all at the same time. What makes him especially memorable is that he genuinely believes he's the hero, even if he's imprisoning and using his own daughter to charge the vault key, killing her at the same time. He constantly claims that he loves her and wants to protect her in his own twisted way, and he probably does care about her, but this idea of love is completely warped by his obsession with control over both her and the general situation. I mean, he isolates her, controls her, uses her powers for his own goals, and keeps her imprisoned for pretty much her entire life. He essentially turns her into a living battery for his own company and his own greed. Her powers allow him to spy on enemies, manage Hyperion systems, and charge the vault key needed to awaken the warrior. Without Angel, Jack would never become as powerful as he did. Angel becomes both the excuse for his actions and the victim of them. Jack convinces himself that everything he does is necessary. He believes he's saving Pandora from chaos. He believes controlling Angel is for her own safety, but he's just wrong. It's kind of interesting as he thinks he's right. Angel's perspective twists this, however. Her father stole her freedom and treated her like property for her entire life. She knows that he doesn't care about her, but he thinks he does. It kind of comes across as self-manipulation, almost him trying to convince himself he cares about her, even if he knows deep down he can't care about her if he's doing these things to her. That dynamic makes their relationship surprisingly realistic despite the sci-fi setting, reflecting the way abusive people often disguise control as protection. And the saddest part is that Angel still seems to care about Jack in some way. She understands how broken he is and remembers who he used to be, but she also knows he's become a monster and far too gone to be called her father anymore. Borderlands 2 is where Angel truly becomes one of the best characters in the franchise. Once again, she acts as a player's guide throughout much of the story. She helps the new Vault Hunter survive against Handsome Jack, and secretly assists the Crimson Raiders whenever she can, even after the twist that she was secretly working for Hyperion and Jack the entire time. Angel has been helping Jack for years because she was forced to. She does truly want to help the Crimson Raiders, but she eventually decides enough is enough. She wants Jack's rule to end and helps the Vault Hunters traverse the bunker and kill it to get into her chambers. One of the biggest moments in Borderlands 2 happens after this, when she leads the Vault Hunters to a chamber and asks them to kill her. It's at this point you see what Angel has become, what she looks like, and she clearly doesn't look like anyone who wants to be there, and goes on constantly about ending it. He ended my life long ago. You have to end this. All talking about Jack as he insults you and pleads to her about stopping all of this. But she doesn't care. She just wants it to all end. She wants everything to stop, and she wants to die. As the Vault Hunters destroy the machines keeping her alive, Angel slowly weakens. Then Jack arrives, but too late to stop them. And for the first time in the series, players see genuine emotional pain from Jack. He completely loses control. He screams, he panics, he blames the Vault Hunters, and from that point onward, he becomes even more unstable and violent. He ends up killing Roland and taking Lilith for his own. But as far as Angel's story is concerned, it all ended there. She insults Handsome Jack one last time, showing she's finally free, before curling up into a ball and passing away. Angel's death is basically the moment where Handsome Jack fully breaks. He realises that without her, there's nothing left holding him together, nothing left to fight for in his own head. He can't save her. I mean, she literally insulted him before she died. I mean, that's one way of really breaking someone. Angel stands out in the Borderlands universe because she's much quieter and calmer than most characters in the series. Borderlands is filled with loud personalities, characters constantly yelling jokes, insults, and ridiculous one-liners, and compared to them, Angel feels almost strangely subdued. She speaks softly, she stays calm, and she rarely lets her emotions explode outward, even correcting herself when she goes to swear.
God darn it. The lunar engineers denied our request. I'll see what I can do. They're launching the fast travel station now. Nothing gets results like a death threat.
Angel spent most of her life alone, trapped inside facilities and connected to machines, so she never really had a chance to experience a normal life or develop normal relationships with people. Because of that, she often comes across as very emotionally distant, but underneath that calm exterior is a huge amount of sadness and guilt. Angel blames herself for the many terrible things Jack has done, even though she was forced into helping him. She understands that her powers helped Hyperion rise to power and contributed to countless deaths all across Pandora. She feels guilty knowing that if she just didn't accidentally kill her mother all those years ago, things would have been entirely different. And that's what truly sucks. It wasn't her fault, it was an accident, and the way that Jack treats it was like she did it on purpose, and yes, he said he's locking her away for her own good, but how many years did it take for her to learn in his eyes? Angel's relationship with the Vault Hunters is complicated too, because she spends so much time manipulating them indirectly, but unlike Jack, she manipulates them for a reason that's ultimately selfless. She sees the Vault Hunters as her only chance to stop Hyperion and finally break free. There's also something tragic about the fact the Vault Hunters are probably the closest thing Angel ever had to friends, yet she barely gets to interact with them in person before dying. Much as many siren deaths in Borderlands, Angel's powers never truly disappeared, just moved on. You see, there can only be a set amount of sirens in the universe at any given time, and one's death results in another one's appearance. Sometimes a siren is born, and sometimes they are chosen. If a siren dies, they can choose whether to pass their own power along to someone of their choosing, or for it to be truly destroyed and for another siren with another set of powers to be ruled in. In Angel's case, she passed it along. After her death, the scientist Patricia Tannis was chosen to inherit her powers, only being transmitted after a few years. It's kind of unknown why Angel passed it on to Tannis of all people, but my guess is that she was the only person with a brain strong enough in the technological field to be able to truly control her phase shift power. Though I disagree with the implementation of sirens being able to essentially choose a successor to their powers, I'm glad that Angel is still around, if only in spirit anyway, and that makes me happy. Angel is one of the most important characters in all of Borderlands. She seemingly connects every major event in the story, whilst also serving as its emotional centre. She starts as a mysterious guide, but slowly becomes one of the series' biggest tragedies. A powerful young woman trapped by fear, control, and exploitation. Her relationship with Jack creates one of the most emotional storylines in the franchise and shows how love can become twisted into possession and abuse. Most importantly, she leaves a lasting impact on the world around her. Her death changes the universe forever, reshapes the way sirens are conceived, and reinforces the franchise's deeper themes about power, control, and sacrifice. Angel may have a tragic story, but at least she was free in the end, even if for only a moment. Scooter is basically Pandora's answer to walking, and also why you shouldn't inbreed. He's loud, weird, energetic, and constantly talking about vehicles, engines, sexy chicks, and his famous catch-a-ride stations. He isn't some legendary fighter or major mastermind behind the story, but became one of the most recognisable characters in the series because of his personality and how consistently entertaining he is whenever he shows up. A lot of Borderlands characters are over the top in some way or another, and Scooter pretty much fits that character description to a T. However, most of the time he's just a guy trying to run his garage and survive on Pandora, Pandora, even if he doesn't think before opening his mouth 99% of the time, especially to women. Over the course of the series, Scooter became more than just the simple, funny-sounding catch-a-ride guy. He turned into one of the characters players always look forward to seeing again. Scooter kinda looks exactly what you'd expect a mechanic living on Pandora to look. He usually wears dirty clothes, covered in grease stains, with surprisingly kept hair, a hodunk hat and a wrench in his hand. He always looks like he's been repairing vehicles for the last 12 hours or something without stopping, and his whole design fits the rough junkyard style that Borderlands is known for, especially Pandora. Side note, but Scooter would have loved Monster energy drinks. Unlike a lot of characters in this series, Scooter doesn't try to look intimidating or cool, he just looks practical. Everything about his appearance matches his personality perfectly. He's also animated in a very energetic way. He talks with his hands a lot, moves around constantly, and is always excited about whatever he's talking about, even if it barely makes sense to you. And of course, his voice is a huge part of why people remember him. Scooter's got some sort of southerny American accent, and its exaggerated delivery made almost every line he said stand out, even if it's for the wrong reasons.
Hey, you seen the new HP4 Turbocasters? You put them thing-a-lang-a-langers on an F-33 chassis and wow! You got a one-way ticket to a subject to conversation you clearly have no interest in. I'm very sorry.
Even people who haven't played Borderlands much will probably recognize the phrase,
"Catch a ride!"
That line basically became tied to the identity of the franchise itself and lends itself to the absurdity of both Borderlands and Scooter's character as a whole. Scooter first appears in the original Borderlands as the guy running the catch-a-ride system, a simple Digistruct garage system that let anyone with authorization spawn a vehicle pretty much anywhere on the planet as long as it was from one of his machines. He also provided you with a little snack when on your travels, as each car comes with a pimentaco in the glove box. Scooter's background is actually one of the more fleshed out stories in the series, largely because of his family and the way they're fleshed out background wise too. He's the son of Mad Moxxi, the famous bar owner and arena host, which is wild when you think about it, and the brother of Ellie. His father was revealed to be Jimbo Hodunk, the leader of the clan that he, Ellie, and Moxxi were once part of, called the Hodunks. Growing up in the Hodunk clan itself, Scooter was surrounded by a family of literal bandits. However, he, Ellie, and Moxxi eventually broke away from the clan life to pursue their passion for machines. Ellie and Scooter both take pride in their mechanical background, whilst knowing that the place they grew up in to gain such knowledge was clearly a harsh environment to do so. Ellie has her own garage, and as we know, Scooter is Scooter. Moxxi, however, decides to try and hide her Hodunk past as much as she can, disguising her accent and dressing in far more elegant manner than her past suggests, though she is caught out every so often, whether that's an accent slip or people occasionally bumping into her fixing machines in a secret workshop. Scooter's relationship with Moxxi herself is a recurring joke throughout the series. He's clearly proud of her being able to escape her past and start multiple successful businesses afterwards, but is also deeply traumatized by her dating life. This leads to some of the most hilariously awkward dialogue between them and whoever sticks around to listen. He and Ellie have a much better dynamic, however. They're both gearheads who respect each other's work, and even if Scooter is a bit more high energy than his sister in most cases, they get along pretty well. I mean, Scooter literally threatens the Vault Hunters if they dare make fun of the way she looks, so he's definitely got that big brother energy about him. It's unknown when Scooter decided to move to New Haven and away from all Hodunk nonsense. When we first meet him, Ellie, and Moxxi, they're all in completely different areas, living out completely different lives to each other. And in the case of Ellie, we have no idea where she even was during the events of the first game, so that makes it even more confusing. My take is that these three were not initially going to be related, but it hits you as a bit of a plot twist when we do eventually find out that Moxxi is Scooter's mother during the events of the secret armory of General Knox, and Ellie was added later on as a way of truly establishing a family dynamic. Either way, Scooter remained in New Haven for quite a while, only moving to T-Bone Junction to help the Vault Hunters with the Crimson Lance situation, and helping them build a beast of a vehicle to travel the long highways in, called the Monster. After this, he returns to New Haven, but eventually is forced into relocating to Sanctuary after the Pandoran occupation by Hyperion and Wilhelm's destruction of the town. His role in Borderlands 2 is very similar to his role in the first game. He stays mostly in his garage in Sanctuary and provides all the assistance that anyone may need, whether that be the catch-a-ride related things or dating advice that you should definitely not take seriously. He also has a key role in the upkeep of Sanctuary itself after moving from New Haven, making sure that the city's general situation is nominal, but also assisting in a secret project. This involves the city itself, which was previously a dull mining operation, flying. Whether he built the flying part of the town himself or whether Dahl built it when Sanctuary was operational is unknown, but my guess is that it's a bit of both. They built it, he maintains and upgrades it. He stays in Sanctuary for a while, but ends up moving to an underground town on Pandora in the Rust Commons East, known as Hollow Point, to expand his garage and catch a ride business, transitioning from a small business owner to franchise owner. It's unknown why he chose Hollow Point of all places to set up a new shop, but it seems to not do so well for him, as he is constantly harassed by the locals of the town, struggles for consistent customers, and with needing to manage multiple garages. On the positive, however, he works alongside a deeply knowledgeable mechanic known as Janie Springs, who is famous on Pandora's moon Elpis for her scrap business, but also for her moon Zoomy stations, which were basically catch-a-ride stations but with rockets in space. She's an important character, but we'll get to her later on. When two con artists who grew up in Hollow Point called Fiona and Sasha show up needing repairs for their busted up caravan, Scooter is glad to help, not just because of the business, but because he recognises both of them from a death rally they recently took place in. When they say they can't afford the money for repairs, Scooter decides that if they race again, he'll sponsor them and do the repairs that are needed entirely for free. They of course agree and end up in a contract together. When two bandits come looking for Fiona and Sasha with a hefty reward for them, he doesn't fess up and gets beaten up for it. Not only does he not demand an apology from the girls for him getting hurt because of them, but actually asks if both of them are okay and weren't too scared, truly showing Scooter's selfless character off. Scooter finishes up on the repairs to their caravan, sends them on their way and returns to his usual business. A few days later, they return, this time asking him to turn that same caravan into a bloody space rocket. Seeing as how Janie was from the moon and basically took up the same line of work as Scooter but with rocket tech, he's pretty confident that him and Janie can get to work on the Borderlands equivalent of that one Top Gear episode. This is the first time we actually get to see Scooter's sometimes misrepresented mechanical genius in person for once, instead of just hearing him brag about it consistently on the radio. Janie says that she could probably scrounge together the parts to make a rocket that would break the atmosphere, but that they'll definitely need a mechanic on board to make sure nothing explodes on them. Upon hearing that, Scooter signs himself up pretty much immediately, insisting he comes. This act right here truly tells you what kind of person Scooter is. Yeah, he might be slightly inclined because he's a bit of a simp for the ladies and likes to impress people, but also that he's extremely kind and puts others' needs before his own. He didn't even think twice before deciding to help out, leaving the planet he's never stepped foot off once, and heading into space of all places. Once they're actually headed for space, Scooter tries on some advertising by trying to throw a massive satellite with his famous catch ride slogan on outside, being classic awkward Scooter. Some people on the ship aren't exactly a fan of this and pull a gun on him, but Fiona defends him and says that if it wasn't for him, they wouldn't even be here in the first place. They eventually let up on it, much to Scooter's excitement. It's all going well, but stops being funny pretty fast when the mission goes sideways. During the flight, two of the rocket boosters get stuck, and if they don't fall off, the whole ship is going to explode and kill everyone on board. Scooter realises someone has to go out there and manually kick the thrusters loose, and without even flinching, he's the one who volunteers for the potential suicide mission. Fiona decides to come with, and Scooter says he'll walk her through letting one of the thrusters go while he works on the other one. After Fiona has successfully dislodged the first thruster, she starts making her way over to Scooter, who's become wedged inside the mechanics of the rocket. With little time left, he urges that Fiona pulls the final switch to let the rocket go. The final moments of Scooter are some of the most endearing, genuine, and heartfelt moments in anyone's story in Borderlands. The way Scooter changes tone instantly hits you as so completely unlike his usual character. He's so serious, calm, and understands the situation he's in. It's his end.
Hey. You gotta go over there, pull that latch, and cut this rocket loose. There's no time for anything else, you understand? You gotta do it or else the whole ship's gonna go.
No, I am not leaving you. That is not an option.
It is, and that's the only option, alright?
No.
Fiona, look at me. This baby's gonna blow, okay? That is happening. And you can't be here when it does.
The last scene and the few ending pieces of dialogue that I had between him and Fiona seriously leave a mark, and if you haven't watched it for yourself, I would consider it. Instead of losing his mind or panicking, he takes his final moments to get everyone to make sure they tell Moxxi and Ellie that he did some awesome shit before drifting off, looking ahead of him, and screaming his iconic slogan out one last time.
Catch a ride!
It's a wild, heroic, and incredibly unforeseeable ending for a guy who started out as a joke character. Out of all the people in the universe, his death was one to me that just felt so out of left field. When I first saw it, it truly left me shocked and caught me off guard. Not many main characters die in Borderlands, and for it to so suddenly happen to Scooter of all people is truly breathtaking. The catch-ride systems just don't feel the same now. Ellie made sure to truly give Scooter one last send-off by constructing a memorial of him using 2 scrap cars. After this, the catch-ride system and business transferred to Ellie, finally epitomising the end of Scooter's story. You'll truly be missed, buddy. Xeno-Iridian archaeological scientist Dr. Patricia Tannis, otherwise known as just Dr. Patricia Tannis, or just Patricia Tannis, or just Tannis, is a somewhat crazy, definitely schizophrenic, and oddly charming scientist that we come to meet in Borderlands. If you were to meet her for the first time, you'd probably find her a bit intense. Initially, Tannis comes off as incredibly cold, clinical, and blunt to the point of being rude. She doesn't do small talk, and if you say hello to her, she might stare at you until a blood vessel pops in her nose, or she might just explain in terrifying detail how your internal organs are currently functioning. She is clearly someone who is far more comfortable around data and ancient alien artifacts than human beings. She has short brown hair, wears a red and brown lab coat that's seen better days, and sports a pair of thick-rimmed goggles, which she never wears. She's tall, thin, and usually looks like she hasn't slept in about 3 weeks, which, honestly, she probably hasn't. To describe Tannis in a casual sense, she is the smartest person in the room who absolutely hates being in the room. She suffers from extreme social anxiety and what is often described as objectum sexuality, meaning she forms deep, emotional, and sometimes romantic attachments to inanimate objects rather than people. This isn't just a quirk, it's a core part of how she survived the trauma of her life on Pandora. She also happens to think bacon is for sycophants and products of incest, which is far from actual truth. Tannis. If you've ever heard Tannis talk, you know she speaks with a very specific deadpan rhythm. She doesn't filter her thoughts, which leads to her saying things that are either deeply disturbing or hilariously honest. For example, she will casually mention her muscular yet supple ceiling tiles, or her intense hatred for the sound of human breathing.
Please follow the smell of vomit and tears so we may talk face to face. As the vomit was mine, I recommend facing away from me. It's important to remember that many unanswered questions still remain. Beyond why Brick won't take the rabies medication I've given him, I remain curious about the origin of the sirens and their ultimate connection to the vaults. That is for another day, however. As for right now, I just need you to shoot more things in the face.
To the Vault Hunters, she's a source of essential information, but she's also someone they have to handle with care because her psyche is incredibly fragile. I'd also love to imagine that she gets equal parts confused and pissed off whenever the Vault Hunters would randomly burst into her personal space, like she wasn't the one that sent them hundreds of miles to go do something. Tannis wasn't always the eccentric hermit we know today. Long before the events of the games, she was a highly respected xenoarchaeologist and the chief scientific advisor for the Dahl Corporation. It's also worth noting that Tannis either invented or at least had a major part in developing the EchoNet, the major communications network used in all the games by pretty much everyone. Those Echo devices that you get in each game, the way people contact you, give you missions, the thing that Gage uploaded all of her diaries to, that's Tannis, or at least a lot of it is. Being the chief scientific advisor for the Dahl Corporation, she had the know-how and the rank to personally work with Dahl to help create said Echo network, which I think is a very undermentioned thing about her character, to be honest, and it's wild how little it's mentioned. A lot of people just look at it as a non-canon thing, but it actually affects the story in Borderlands 1. She was born to blue-collar parents, specifically isotope designers, and her life was relatively normal until she was assigned to the desert planet of Pandora. Dahl actually sent her there to find evidence of Iridian technology, the same kind of alien tech that made the Atlas Corporation a galactic superpower. Tannis arrived with massive teams of scientists and high hopes for the future. They set up camps, started digging, and for a while it looked like a standard corporate expedition. However, Pandora is essentially a death trap, and as the planet's hostile environment and wildlife took their toll, Dahl eventually realized the planet was a lost cause. Instead of executing a safe evacuation, the corporation simply packed up and left, abandoning the civilian scientists to fend for themselves against the bandits and monsters. It's also worth mentioning that these same bandits that were left are like mostly Dahl people anyway. Either people that Dahl decided to leave there that were prisoners that could have earned their freedom, or Dahl miners that eventually went crazy because Dahl gave them the same work schedule as the average Chinese steel factory worker. What followed for Tannis and her team was a literal horror movie that played out over several years. Tannis watched as her colleagues were hunted and eaten by the local wildlife, specifically skags. In Tannis's hidden journals, the audio logs you find in the first game, we get a documentary-style look at her mind breaking. She describes the 114 days since the others were eaten, and recounts one of her most haunting memories, hiding under the corpse of a colleague named Carl while he was being eaten alive by skags, just so she could stay hidden and survive. Being the sole survivor of such a massive group caused her mind to fracture. To cope with the silence and the isolation, she began assigning personalities to inanimate objects. She starts talking to her echo recorder and famously formed a relationship with two chairs hanging from her ceiling, whom she named Philippe and Clark. By the time the first Vault Hunters find her, she is no longer socially functional, but she is the only person alive who knows how to find the vault. In Borderlands 1, Tannis lives in a secluded dig site in the Rust Commons. She acts as the primary guide for the players, explaining the legend of the vault and the 200-year cycle required for the vault key to be charged. During this time, she is essentially a contractor for the Vault Hunters, but her loyalty is shaky because she's terrified of everything. The most significant part she plays in the original Borderlands is her quote-unquote betrayal. Commandant Steele, the leader of the Crimson Lance, Atlas Corporation's private army, finds Tannis and uses physical threats and the destruction of her research to force her to cooperate. Tannis hands over the vault key pieces to the villains, and while the players initially see this as betrayal, it's later framed as the actions of a woman who had no military support and was simply trying to survive another day on a planet that had already taken everything from her. After the vault is opened and the destroyer is defeated, she stays on Pandora, continuing her research in secret. Between the first and second games, the timeline gets even darker for Tannis, as Handsome Jack and the Hyperion Corporation take control of Pandora. They realise Tannis is the galaxy's leading expert on the vaults. Knowing this, he went to visit her with his little mercenary friend named Wilhelm. It's unknown where on Pandora she was located at the time, but Tannis managed to be found and captured by Hyperion and subjected to horrific torture. Jack wanted the location of the vault key and information on the siren Lilith. In Borderlands 2, you find echo logs titled The Torture Chairs. These logs explain that Jack didn't just hurt her physically, he targeted her psychological crutches. He destroyed her chairs, Philippe and Clark, mentioned earlier, in front of her and tried to snap her mind completely. Tannis survived this, but it's the reason why in later games her hatred for Handsome Jack and Hyperion is so visceral and cold. Here is an excerpt from those recordings for some context. Echo 1. I've been relocated to Sanctuary against everyone's better judgment. Not my own, mind you. I never wanted to be here. I was perfectly content to live out my days in a non-standard living arrangement with two ceiling chairs I met at a bar fight. Oh, they're adorable. They barely speak any English, and if you have to ask what a ceiling chair is, I pity the life you've wasted. Echo 2. I should discuss the scroller fan in the room. The reason for my relocation was an elongated and systematically unpleasant torture at the hands of Jack's cronies. Roland and his well-defined pectoral muscles were kind enough to entrust the vault key with me after the awakening of the Destroyer, not to be confused with the Warrior. Seriously, those sound nothing alike. Echo 3. Oh right, torture. I asked nicely on several occasions to take proper precautions against bacteria on the instruments, but it fell upon idiotic ears. As they cut into my flesh over and over, I would fade in and out of consciousness and whisper to the ceiling chairs that it was going to be okay. Clark was afraid at first. His forelegs trembled against the cold ceiling, but he knew he had to be strong for me. Then they went to work on his brother, Philippe. Echo 4. Philippe, Philippe was so brave. He was so brave for me when the rotary saws began to ply his legs from his body. Clark cried out for his brother, even when one of the torturers inadvertently sat on him and muffled his cries. The last thing Philippe said before he passed on to the great wooden beyond was, "I love you, Patty. I love you." And then he was gone. Echo 5. It's lonely here in Sanctuary. Sure, Clark prattles around on the ceiling, but it's hardly the same. Jack has taken so much from me. Jack has taken the only happiness I've ever had in his asinine quest for the warrior and more power. Revenge is as pointless as music, but on this occasion, I will allow myself the revenge. I will allow myself to aid in his downfall. Mark my words, Jack. You are going to die. After the Vault Hunters gather all the echoes and return to Dr. Tannis to give them to her, she says, the chronicles of my torture. I shall warm up some cocoa and listen to these again. Maniac. By the time of the second game, Tannis has joined the Crimson Raiders in the city of Sanctuary. She acts as their lead scientist and iridium expert. Her role in this is a bit more technical than the first game. She helps the Vault Hunters figure out how to bypass Hyperion security and explains the dangerous properties of iridium, the mineral shard that started appearing after the first vault opened. She also gets herself involved in a few weird side quests, such as giving pizza to mutants and figuring out how to kill a raid boss. Okay. Despite her claim that she hates everyone, she forms a genuine, if weird, bond with Roland, the leader of the Raiders. Roland was one of the few people who treated her with actual patience. In one of her audio logs, she expresses genuine confusion because she didn't feel the urge to vomit when Roland was nice to her, which is Tannis speak for, "I think this person is my friend." After Roland is killed by Jack, Tannis is visibly affected in her own detached way, and she becomes even more dedicated to stopping Jack's plan to wake the Warrior. After the defeat of the Warrior, Jack, and Hyperion as a whole, Tannis decides to stick around with the Crimson Raiders and Sanctuary. Little is known as to why she does this, whether she felt like she had some sort of family here now, in whatever weird way she would describe having a family, or whether she simply just thought the lab there was adequate enough. Either way, this is where she remained until Sanctuary was eventually destroyed by Hector and the building of Sanctuary 3 was finished. She did manage to find yet another vault on Pandora, but Mr. Torg and the entirety of the Torg Corporation just took over this entirely, and she decided to give up and just go home. Low-key though, I do just find it incredibly funny that after the intro of Torg's campaign of Carnage, Tannis is literally never seen from or heard from again in the entire DLC. She literally just decides, okay, whatever, these guys are doing this with it, Blood of the Ultimate Coward, blah-de-blah, I'm done. By the events of the third game, Tannis has seemingly dropped a lot of her socio-phobic tendencies, both through general involvement in the story, but also her interactions with the Crimson Raiders. Whilst, don't get me wrong, she would still rather sit in a dark, silent room over doing, well, not that. She's at least gathered an element of context in regards to actually communicating with people, which is a start, I guess. At this time, we find out the most significant plot point for her character in the entire franchise. For years, fans had theories about Tannis, including me, but Borderlands 3 confirmed her secret. She is a siren. When Handsome Jack's daughter, Angel, died in the second game, her phase shift powers had the chance to be passed along as kind of an inheritance. Because Angel had a connection to Tannis, and also perhaps because Tannis was few of the people who actually understood her and was intelligent enough in that field to handle the powers, they were passed on to her. Tannis kept this secret for years, building a secret lab inside an old Iridian dig site to practice her powers in private. She revealed these powers during a mission where she was captured by the Calypso twins. She used her phase shift ability to take control of a massive machine, revealing her glowing siren wings for the first time. This revelation changed her role from a background scientist to frontline power player in the story. She uses her ability to talk to machines to help maintain the Sanctuary 3, and ultimately helps the Vault Hunters charge the machines needed to stop the Great Vault from opening. By the end of the game, with Lilith gone, Tannis stands as one of the primary leaders of the Crimson Raiders. And so far, that's kinda it for Tannis' story. After the crash landing of Sanctuary 3 on Kairos, she's just nowhere to be found, much like Marcus. Considering the major involvement she's had in the main stories previous, and the fact she's now extremely powerful and heavily important for the future of the universe, it's really jarring that she just sort of disappears. For Marcus it makes sense, he wasn't really ever a main character, but Tannis literally has always been. I mean, apart from the Tannis on a fish throwaway Easter egg gag, she's literally never mentioned moving forwards. At least in the case of Dr. Zed, we've come to know that he's off somewhere trying to get his medical degree, and in real life his voice actor went through a really rough few years. But Tannis literally never comes up again, and she shares the same voice actor with Lilith, who does appear in the game, even if somewhat briefly. So yeah, kind of abrupt end to her story for now. Maybe she'll appear in future DLC in Borderlands 4 or even in the next game, but it is yet to be seen. Tannis also appears in a few other things in Borderlands. She's in Claptrap's New Robot Revolution DLC, but that wasn't really considered as canon, so I didn't include it in her main story. All she does is try to build a robot companion out of spare parts, and that's pretty much it. Interestingly, and as I just mentioned, she has the same voice actor as Lilith, being Colleen Clinkenbeard. The developers have often stated that Tannis was originally meant to be more of a minor character, but her unique mad scientist dialogue was so popular with the writing team and the fans that she was expanded into a lead role. She was also actually supposed to be Lilith at one point, with behind the scenes artwork and a secret room you can access in Borderlands 1 referring to her as Dr. Lilith Cashlin, mercenary scientist. Little is known as to whether it just was a name change to make her Tannis instead of Lilith, or whether Lilith was supposed to be a scientist character before making her a siren and coming up with the whole Tannis character with the leftover stuff. It's super interesting and may also be the reason why Colleen voices both characters. Also, fun fact which I literally just found out about now is Lilith Cashlin mercenary scientist's age, that being 29 as you can see in the bottom left, is actually the exact same age that Colleen Clinkenbeard was at the time of Borderlands 1. She's 46 now, which means in 2008, God that was so long ago, we are all going to die, was 29, which is cool. I find that interesting that they just took her actual age and slapped it on there. No idea if they did that on purpose or she just happens to be the same age, but it's cool either way. Tannis is the narrative glue of Borderlands, if you think about it. Without her, the players are just treasure hunters with no real direction. She provides the intellectual, if not kind of sociopathical and schizophrenic weight to the story. She is the one who explains why things are happening, where they're happening and how to stop them. Even if she wishes, she didn't have to tell you any of that and you would go away. She seriously shows off the harsh truths of living alone and with completely fractured mental health problems for years, and I'm very surprised she wasn't completely broken after what Jack and Wilhelm did to her. Tannis is a fascinating study of trauma. Most characters in games who go through madness phases either become villains or are cured by the end of the story. Tannis is completely different. She didn't get better, she still has that social anxiety, she still talks to objects, and she still has PTSD from the Dahl expedition and from being tortured relentlessly by Hyperion. However, she learned to live with those things. She found a community in the Crimson Raiders, even if she doesn't really know if that is what that is, and she just accepts it. They don't try to fix her, they just give her a lab and listen to what she tells them, and then goes ahead. She's a rare example of a character who is explicitly coded as having some sort of autistic character traits, but without being a flat stereotype of it. She is brilliant, but she's also messy, mean, funny, slightly crazy, and slightly understanding all at once. She's a person who works incredibly hard, stays up for days, starts smelling, and uses her specific way of looking at the world to see things others miss. Though she's slightly crazy, says exactly what she's thinking even if she knows it will hurt your feelings, and would definitely call me a product of incest just because I like bacon, she's gone, and I wish she would come back. Where have you gone, Tannis? Mad Moxxi, previously known as Moxxi Hodunk and now just Moxxi, is the charming bar owner and mother to two of the favourites in the franchise, Scooter and Ellie, one of which we have already talked about, RIP. We all know Moxxi, curvaceous, courageous and contagious, in more ways than one. She's more than just a bar owner though. Moxxi has gotten up to many business ventures in her time, from the Underdome Battle Arena, the Bed, Breakfast and Bank in Concordia, the Torg Arena on Pandora, and the handsome Jackpot. Eventually. She never shies away from a monetary investment, and she's always trying to keep herself busy. Unfortunately, she can be very quick to like something though, tying into, yes, her very many business ventures, but also her awfully busy relationship life, which is canonically terrible, leading her to have several romantic interests in absolutely awful people. If you were to walk into one of Moxxi's bars for the first time, she would definitely stand out. Moxxi's look is inspired by a mix of circus ringmasters and a classic burlesque dancer style. She almost always wears either a mainly dark red or purple outfit with black and white stripes to accompany it. This is always joined by a tight corset, long tailcoat, thigh-high boots, fishnets and a small top hat tilted to the side with a playing card or two positioned front. Her face is covered in thick white face paint, heavy dark eye makeup, bright red lipstick and large red blushings on her cheeks. She also has two massive personalities which carry a heart on the left side. Not that I ever noticed. She's tall, prideful, and always carries herself with total confidence. Initially, Moxxi comes off as a hyper-flirtatious, very theatrical entertainer. When she speaks, her voice is smooth, slow, and full of playful teasing. She calls almost everyone sugar, horn, or stud, and she constantly uses double entendres, which are just jokes that have hidden, usually dirty meaning behind them. She seems like the ultimate party hostess, someone whose only job is to pour drinks, look good, and keep people entertained. But that whole personality is actually a clever act, which she hides underneath. Beneath all that makeup, the short skirts and the flirting is one of the smartest, most ruthless, mechanically gifted minds on the entire planet. Moxxi knows how to talk to people the way she knows how they would want to be talked to, which she uses to her advantage wholeheartedly, being the complete opposite to Tannis in this regard, as she would just tell you something she knows you don't want to hear. On a planet like Pandora, people are always looking for a weakness to exploit. By pretending to be some ditzy, flirtatious barmaid, Moxxi gets people to lower their guard. Warlords, bandits, and corporate executives look at her and assume she isn't a threat, but whilst they're busy staring at her or trying to impress her, Moxxi is quietly listening, gathering secrets, and figuring out how to use them to her advantage. She's definitely a psychological temptress. She puts on this whole thing as an act, but for more reason than just one. Moxxi's past is something that's both incredibly secret and something she likes to keep private for a reason, to keep up with her act, but also because of how horrible it all was. Little is known about her upbringing, probably on purpose, but we do know that she and her 2 children were part of a dirty Pandoran clan. Specifically, she comes from the Hodunk clan, which is a large, violent, hillbilly-style family that lives in a desert wasteland called the Dust. They specialise in cars, caravans, and anything that's related to them, making for a lifestyle that Moxxi initially loved, but wanted to escape from pretty quickly after Scooter was born. In terms of things we know about Moxxi's time with the clan, it's limited, but a few lines of dialogue from Scooter, Ellie, and occasionally Moxxi herself can fill us in a bit. Moxxi's husband while she was with the clan, and also the father of Ellie and Scooter, was revealed to be Jimbo Hodunk, a bald, gibberish-speaking amputee with a mustache and a guitar. Little reason is known as to why Moxxi chose him of all people, but the main theory was that she was actually chosen by the clan to do so. We also know she was very young when she was married. No specific age is mentioned, but she was at least a teenager, possibly late teens at best. Due to her marrying Jimbo, she was most likely also the clan wife, which is a title given to Hodunk girls that are to be married at a young age to one of the men. Typical inbred stuff. The reason we know this is because Ellie was actually declared to be the next clan wife when she was just an infant, which Moxxi absolutely detested and is one of the reasons she wanted to leave the clan. It's also the reason as to the theory of Moxxi being a teen when married. The clan seem to pick girls that are quite young, and by the looks of Jimbo, he seems to be a lot older than Moxxi is. During her affiliation with the Hodunks, she was brought to a meaningless clan-based attack, with one of the Zaffids, that being Lucky Zaffid, having his way with her. I would say what it was actually called, but I'm trying not to get demonetized. After this, her son Scooter made a promise one day he would get his revenge on Lucky. 20 years later, that promise came true, burying him in a shallow grave. Moxxi and both her children are actually extremely gifted in mechanical work, with Moxxi in particular being very bright in that field, but if you were to come across her for the first time, that would be the opposite to what you would think. Both Ellie and Scooter take a lot of pride in their skills as mechanics, even though they know the harsh environment of the Dust was a brutal place to learn the trade. Whilst Ellie runs her own successful garage and Scooter stays true to his eccentric self, Moxxi does everything she can to bury her Hodunk past. She actively hides her country accent and dresses in a much more elegant, flashy style than her history would suggest. Still, her past does slip out every now and then, whether she accidentally drops her vocal act when she's mad, or someone catches her working on machinery in a secret workshop. It's not all a wolf in sheep's clothing act like it would first suggest for Moxxi. It's also a woman who deeply wants to let go of who she once was, even if that means faking her voice or dressing in a manner that's not at all comfortable to her. It's very layered when you think about it. Growing up as a Hodunk meant living in constant poverty and endless violence. The Hodunks are famous for their thick country accents, their love of building crazy vehicles, and their never-ending war with a rival family called the Zaffids. This upbringing taught Moxxi everything she needed to know about fighting, betrayal, and how to survive when the world is trying to kill you. It's also, obviously, where her thick country accent comes from. Moxxi's decision to leave the Hodunk clan is the most important moment in her whole backstory. She realised that staying with the clan meant a short, violent life. More importantly, she was a mother. Moxxi loved her kids more than anything, and she knew that if she raised them inside the Hodunk clan, they would eventually die in a pointless turf war against the Zaffids. So, one day, she packed up her things, took her kids, and left. She didn't have any money or weapons, but she realised that people on Pandora would pay anything for a distraction from their miserable lives, so decided to get into the entertainment and alcohol business, realising that owning the bars gave her more power and safety than owning a gang. To get her businesses off the ground and keep them safe, Moxxi used a series of strategic marriages. She's been married and divorced multiple times, and almost every relationship was tied to business or survival, and bad choices overall, to be honest. Her most famous ex-husband is Marcus Kincaid, the greedy arms dealer who runs the gun shops across Pandora. Even though they got divorced and constantly bicker, marrying Marcus gave Moxxi a direct connection to the planet's economy and weapons supply. He's also the only marriage that she had that both of them still look back upon fondly. Marcus still has pictures of Moxxi and says he misses her sometimes, and Moxxi hasn't tried to kill him yet, so I'd say that's pretty much the same thing. She was also married to a dangerous criminal named Mr. Shank, whom she eventually had killed when he became a problem. She didn't marry, but dated Mordecai, one of the original Vault Hunters, after he won the Underdome, but she broke up with him because his heavy drinking and depression were getting in the way of her goals. Also, owning bars and having a boyfriend who is an alcoholic is like hiring only mice to work at a cheese factory. Not the best combination ever. She also had a short romantic relationship with a loudmouth mechanic and scrounging cannibal called Motor Mama. After Moxxi found out about the whole cannibal thing, and also the fact that she had devoured one of Moxxi's previous female lovers, she called the relationship off. Luckily for everyone, Motor Mama was eventually killed off at the hands of Vault Hunters. Most importantly though, she had a romantic relationship with Handsome Jack, back before he became the evil dictator of Pandora, and even further before he had any importance at Hyperion in the first place. These relationships weren't just about romance, they were alliances. By getting close to and marrying powerful men, Moxxi made sure her businesses were protected and that she always knew what the major factions were planning. Moxxi makes her very first appearance in the DLC called Mad Moxxi's Underdome Riot, after the events of Borderlands 1. In this story, she's introduced as the host of the Underdome, which is a massive gladiatorial arena. She brings the toughest fighters from all over the planet to battle waves of bandits, psychos, and monsters for the prize money and her own amusement. On the surface, she claimed she was hosting the tournament to find a strong new husband, but in reality, the Underdome was a giant networking project. By watching these battles, Moxxi was able to see exactly who the strongest and most reliable mercenaries on Pandora were. This is where she met the original Vault Hunters, Roland, Lilith, Mordecai, and Brick. By giving them jobs and prizes, she built a strong relationship with them, which laid the groundwork for the resistance movement later on. In canon, Mordecai ends up winning the tournament, and Moxxi along with that. As mentioned, they eventually split up, but this was the first we know of Moxxi actually being part of and interacting with the story of the Vault Hunters. The pre-sequel, the next game in the canon, takes place on Pandora's moon, Elpis, and shows a huge turning point for Moxxi's character. At this time, set before the events of Borderlands 2, the third time we actually meet Moxxi, she is running a high-end bar called the Up and Over Bar on Elpis' capital city, known as Concordia. She provides normal drinks, special cocktails, and two of the best-known DJs of all time operate her dance floor. This point in time is where she's first found out to be properly faking her accent, and also found out to be a mechanical savant, as the back of her bar is actually just a full workshop.
Bubbles and birds, bubbles and birds.
Moxxi?
Hey, whoa, what are you doing? What are you doing in here?
Sorry.
Damn it, I really don't like people seeing me out of character. The hell do you want?
She likes to keep it a secret, so is very pissed off that she was found out about it, but this does start to show her very secretive type of life for the first time. Now, in terms of the actual events that happened to do with Jack and her relationship with him at the time, it's quite complicated, and a lot of it doesn't really seem to make sense in the timeline. Mostly because I do think they were making up a lot of it as they were going along, the developers I mean, not Moxxi and Jack, but I also think the developers forgot how absolutely hard fans like me look into tiny offhand comments that they have made and probably forgotten in the past. For an example, let's take a look at a post from Streeper, I don't know how to pronounce the name, sorry, posted about this exact confusion from a few years ago. Quote, "So, I've had a problem with the original Borderlands timeline for a long time. I don't know if anyone else has posted it here, but I've noticed some problems. Here's some things that have been established. In The Good, the Bad, and the Mordecai, Mordecai says that after he wins the Underdome, he gets the ultimate prize, Moxxi herself. But Moxxi leaves Mordecai for Jack. Then, in Rackaholics Anonymous, Moxxi says, hey, until he set all those people on fire, Jack seemed like a pretty nice guy. In Hell Hath No Fury, Moxxi mentions that Jack destroyed her Underdome after she dumped him, and later Moxxi says, haven't heard Jack that angry since I kicked his plastic surgery's ass to the curb. In the pre-sequel, Moxxi is already established as Jack's ex, meaning Jack must have gotten with Moxxi, burned all those people, had plastic surgery, got dumped, and destroyed the Underdome, all before the events of the pre-sequel. Angel exists in the pre-sequel. Her picture is on Jack's desk. Angel's mother is neither Moxxi's nor Nisha's daughter, meaning Jack must have already been in another relationship before Moxxi. But Angel does something to her mother, causing Jack to restrain and allegedly abuse her. Jack restrains Angel after the death of his wife, meaning Angel was restrained throughout all of the pre-sequel. Now, whilst everything could be absolutely boiled down to characters just being ignorant because Deus Ex Machina we needed to make a game, I still want to disclose my problems. Jack's demeanour is shown to shift throughout the pre-sequel towards the sociopath he is in Borderlands 2, which makes the burning people event seem out of place. Angel is never mentioned in the pre-sequel, even though she exists, and must be restrained before now in order for the event of Borderlands 1 to have happened. Moxxi had all the former malice of her run-ins with Jack prior to the pre-sequel. She likely wouldn't have helped Jack so easily. Angel's age isn't given, but she was old enough to be the guardian angel in the first game, and in Get to Know Jack, she is heard being restrained, so she'd be at least 15 by the events of the pre-sequel, minimum of 12 to 13 by the end of Borderlands 1, time passed before the pre-sequel, meaning her mother has been dead for a long time now. If that's true, Jack's demeanour was shifting before the pre-sequel as he becomes very sensitive to discussions about his wife, making his attitude in the pre-sequel odd. And some more plausible nitpicks here, which aren't too out of place, but still seem odd. Jack had plastic surgery prior to being with Moxxi, which means prior to being punched by Lilith. Why? If Jack's wife isn't dead during the pre-sequel, then where is she? Angel was restrained on Pandora, meaning her and Jack's wife were probably together on a different planet before her death, just ignoring everything Jack was doing. Moxxi and the Vault Hunters turn on Jack because they notice him become more sinister when he killed the scientist, so they betrayed him. But if he'd already burned people and destroyed Moxxi's Underdome, why wouldn't they already be on edge? And some counterpoints. Jack hated Moxxi and the Vault Hunters after the pre-sequel, so they did not get back together before the burning / destruction / plastic surgery. Angel definitely existed before the pre-sequel. Her picture is on Jack's desk, and she was already past infancy and toddler's age by then. Now then. Let me try to explain everything from that and kind of like break it down a little bit so it makes it a bit easier to consume / I know a lot of them are probably conflicting values or whatever, but I just thought it was an interesting post. So the plastic surgery comment could have been easily explained as insulting him as he was, like way after she dumped him, like an insult about him currently, not as if he had plastic surgery when they dated. The before he set all those people on fire comment is a tad bit less easy to explain. Once again, it could have happened after they broke up, and it was only when he set them on fire she finally realized he wasn't good at all. But it doesn't seem like it's in his character to be setting people on fire before the pre-sequel. But if it happened afterwards, setting people on fire wouldn't be anywhere near the worst thing she saw him do, meaning it's a slightly weird comment to make, so it's a bit less explainable. Angel's whole thing has always been a bit confusing to me. She looks like she could be way older than at least 15 in Borderlands 1, considering she looked to be in her early to mid-20s in Borderlands 2, but Jack can't be any older than like, what, maybe 40? But Borderlands 1 was quite a while before Borderlands 2's timeline-wise, yet Angel looks and sounds the same age in both. I mean, you can tell the sound difference between a 15-year-old and a 25-year-old woman pretty easily, right? The argument could be made that sirens don't age as fast, but that's never really been explored. Plus, that just makes the whole age gap between Angel and Jack even more confusing. She would have to be even older than about 25 if she ages slowly, but Jack can't be having kids at like 17 years old, so that just doesn't make any sense. Plus, he had to meet Moxxi and date her without her ever hearing of or even seeing Angel's picture once. I know it's very possible, but Jack has a picture of her on his desk, for fuck's sake. Maybe no one's allowed in his office, I guess, but that's still a display of someone who technically doesn't exist. It's kind of hard to keep that a secret. I don't know. I'm kind of getting off track with the whole Angel and Jack thing. I know this bit is about Moxxi. Sorry. All I'm trying to relay is Borderlands can be very, very confusing with the chronology, especially when you hear a lot about relationships from one side and not another. Or you hear too much about a relationship and it goes a bit too far, but also never includes anything super concrete, just like offhand comments here and there, or rumors, or I heard this, or he said this, and then they just contradict it later on. So yeah. At the first point of the pre-sequel, Moxxi supports Jack because she trusts him. He seems like a good guy, and he seems to just be trying to do the right thing. But Moxxi is an expert at reading people. As Jack gets more power, she starts to notice his hidden cruelty, his massive ego, and how much he starts to enjoy killing people. Instead of just sitting back, Moxxi decides to act. She teams up with Roland and Lilith, who are having a holiday on the moon after the events of the first game, to sabotage the Eye of Helios space laser that Jack was trying to use for his advantage. It was initially being used by Dahl to try and blow up the moon, which Jack tries to stop, but when Moxxi finds out that this eye was actually from the vault monster, the Destroyer, she realizes that no one should have that much power. She actively betrays Jack and tries to blow him up to prevent him from becoming a tyrant. Jack survives the explosion, and this betrayal is part of what drives him completely insane. But Moxxi's actions show that she is willing to risk her life to stop a monster from taking over. By the time Borderlands 2 starts, Moxxi decides to move her brand new bar to Sanctuary. It's not exactly known as to why she decided to do this, but the most obvious guess is that she managed to start quite a bonding relationship with Roland and Lilith after the events on Elpis, and she took up a request from them to move to the city. Also, the fact that her own son Scooter was there probably helped her decide, maybe wanting to be close to him just in case. Her new bar provides lots of entertainment, from darts to one-armed bandit slot machines to any random endeavour that she decides to send the Vault Hunters on. If she's tipped enough, she also likes to hand out information about her life to anyone who's willing to listen, and also provide weaponry. Not too sure if that's canon or not, but they are something she seems to offer, I guess. As far as the actual main story goes here, she has no relevance in it. She doesn't make or have any major impact in it at all, and only really serves to provide extra context to different places and characters, such as her relationship with Jack and Mordecai, but you could honestly leave her out of the entire game and it would make no lick of difference to the actual main plot. Sometime after the Warrior and Handsome Jack are defeated, another vault is found on Pandora by Patricia Tannis. Wanting in on this, the Torg Corporation sets up a massive tournament to find the biggest badass of all time to open it. Mr. Torg himself invites the Vault Hunters to come and participate in said tournament, but says they need a sponsor to fund all of their fights. But, to their advantage, Mr. Torg knew the perfect person, Moxxi. After rescuing her from the hands of Pyro Pete, they set up a deal in Moxxi's brand new bar, the Torg Arena Bar. Original name, I know. And then go on to win the competition together. This is the same competition that the previously mentioned ex of Moxxi's Motor Mama took place in, so it was definitely a bit of a revenge sort of story for Moxxi, as well as an investment. It also has a large role in the Headhunter DLC, Mad Moxxi and the Wedding Day Massacre, in which her old clan, the Hodunks, that had been all but destroyed at this point by Ellie and the Vault Hunters, was planning on having a wedding to bring them and their bitter rivals, the Zaphids, together once and for all in holy matrimony. By the time the Vault Hunters enter the scene, it's all chaos. The couple that are to be wed aren't exactly getting along, and Moxxi thinks she has the perfect idea. A love potion. But it all goes wrong and the Vault Hunters end up killing everyone involved, apart from Moxxi herself. Nice to know it all went well. An important note is that Moxxi actually shows off her mechanical prowess in a rare instance, building a loader called Innuendo Bot 5000 from a hacked Hyperion Exploder bot. He does previously appear in the game, but this is the first time we actually found out it was Moxxi herself who made him. I mean, the name gives it away, but you know, still. In this spin-off game, Tales from the Borderlands, Moxxi goes through a massive personal tragedy. Her son, Scooter, sacrifices his life during a space mission to help save the main characters. At this time, Moxxi is seemingly still giving out bounties for at least Zero the Vault Hunter, as she is heard giving him instructions over the Echo device.
Don't sweat it, babe. That's one less bandit lord we have to worry about. There's plenty of time for sweating later, once you come back to me for your reward.
Losing Scooter completely breaks her. In the last DLC for Borderlands 2, Commander Lilith and the Fight for Sanctuary, we see her dealing with the grief. She drops the flirtatious jokes completely when talking about him. She helps build a memorial for her son and works with her daughter Ellie to make sure his vehicle business, the Catch a Ride Station network, stays open forever. The story adds a lot of simple human depth to Moxxi, proving that her main goal in life was always just to protect her family. In Borderlands 3, Moxxi takes her business into space, running a bar once again, this time on Sanctuary 3. She doesn't really have any major points in the story where she gets involved, but she does have the new Vault Hunters to take part in some sex game that one of her ex-boyfriend's killer vault is running. For the sole reason of murdering him, she lures him, saying the Vault Hunters are playing in her honour, before meeting with them nearby to hand them a booby trap device and killing him. It's a very large quest, yes, but it's purely a personal venture for Moxxi and doesn't affect the main story in any way. It does once again show off her really poor dating history, and also that you should definitely not get on the wrong side of her, because she will not forget, even years later. Her biggest moment in this era happens in the DLC called Mad Moxxi's Heist of the Handsome Jackpot. Years ago, Moxxi had designed a beautiful luxury space casino, and Handsome Jack stole her blueprints, built the casino for himself, put his face on everything, and took all the credit. After Jack died, the casino became a lockdown wasteland full of trapped loaders and bandits. Moxxi gathers a crew of Vault Hunters to break into the casino, fight through all the automated security, and take over. She realises she'll need the help of Timothy Lawrence though, a Jack doppelganger, who she really doesn't trust, but learns to in due time and decides to give him a chance at a date with her. Considering he looks like Jack, but is actually a decent person and not some psychological psychotic maniac, it seems like the perfect match. This DLC is great for Moxxi's character building because it shows off her skills as an architect and planner. By the end of the story, she completely owns the space station, giving her massive wealth and also the ultimate revenge against her now dead ex-boyfriend. Borderlands 4 is a more involved story for Moxxi. She's once again established her own bar called Bottoms Up, this time on the planet of Kairos after Sanctuary 3 managed to crash on the surface. She's one of only a few members of the original crew that actually appear in the game and were on the ship when it landed, so it makes sense she would have a more front seat role in the story. Zane, a Vault Hunter during the events of Borderlands 3, is now on top of her security, going on any and all quests she has for him, including finding anyone else from Sanctuary 3 that has gone missing and any information about the Ripper clan, the large bandit clan in the area. A moment in this game once again comes in the DLC, with Ellie in the Vault of the Damned. Much like how I mentioned before, Moxxi has been trying to find all of the resistance of Sanctuary 3 that have disappeared since his crash landing on Kairos. Ellie, Moxxi's daughter, is one of these people, so Moxxi asks the Vault Hunters to help her investigate into finding her and bring her home safe. In the real world, Moxxi's character works so well because of great design and voice acting. She's voiced by Brenna Palencia, a famous voice actress who does an amazing job showing Moxxi's two different sides. Palencia has to use a smooth, theatrical voice for Moxxi's everyday lines, but then has to instantly switch to a harsh, angry country accent whenever Moxxi gets mad. This voice work makes Moxxi feel like a real person who is choosing to put on a show, rather than just some cartoon character. Brenna has also voiced in some other quite well-known franchises, such as One Piece, Dragon Ball, Tokyo Ghoul, My Hero Academia, The Division, and even Deadpool. I'd argue she's most famous for Moxxi, but of course I'd say that about a Borderlands character in a Borderlands video, so take that with a grain of salt. Either way, she's really added a lot to Moxxi's character, and it's great to continue to have her as the voice of one of Borderlands' most alluring characters. When you look at the whole Borderlands series, Moxxi is an outlier when it comes to the way she's intertwined with everything. She's always close by, but is consistently doing her own thing within that. During the first game, she's on Pandora, yeah, but operating a battle arena for people to come and visit. In 2, she's operating multiple businesses all over the shop, but is still mostly hanging around in a bar back in Sanctuary. And in 3 and 4, it's very much the same. She's there and has a slight input, but is seemingly more focused on side ventures like the Handsome Jackpot, for example. She's hungry for business, very clearly, but you also have to remember that she's just a normal person. She's still a badass, but in a fucking hell, alright sort of way, you know? She's honestly just great, and I'm really glad she appears in as much DLC content as she does. It suits her. She's basically the DLC queen at this point. She's always just got that little side project going on that no one knew about, and it explodes into something massive, and that makes every interaction with her brilliant and unique. But also, mad. Moxxi, mad Moxxi, mad. Crazy Earl is your typical hidey-hole, black market, rare mineral collector archetype character. If that even is an archetype of character. He doesn't really do much in terms of, well, anything really, but he's a well-known and recurring character, so fuck it, I gotta do my job, I guess. Having the same job in pretty much every game apart from the original, Earl is crazy. He sits behind a reinforced metal door all day, spouting nonsense and not taking too kindly to strangers interrupting his peace. When he is in a mood to show himself, he slides back a small entrance in the door and reveals himself. Only his face can be seen and has ever been seen, so description wise that's all I can work off. He's a middle-aged man with crooked yellow and rotting teeth, a small Austrian painter mustache, a very large nose with a plaster on the arch of it, one eye being almost shut at all times, and 2 very large ears to go with that massive nose. He's also seemingly had some sort of brain surgery or something requiring access to his brain at some point, as there's multiple heavy-duty surgical staples shoddily punched into the entire top half of his head in a massive circle, as well as a large metal plate at the front. It's not ever revealed why he has these or even mentioned by him at all, so I don't even know if he knows he has them, but it's definitely a contributing factor to Earl's Earlness. and that's all you get. He did once live with his dog Scrappy at one point, but he escaped and has never been seen since. In terms of what he actually does game to game, it varies, but his most well-known feature is being the supplier of things that Vault Hunters may need, being SDU slots for weapons and gear in Borderlands 2 and the pre-sequel, and a seller of clothing and paint jobs for characters in Borderlands 3. The only time he makes a substantial impact on the actual plot is in the first game and number 4, the most recent as of this video. So let's get into it. Earl is the sedentary type, almost considered a hermit. The one thing that separates him from this title is the fact that he actually owned and ran his own scrapyard at one point, and also moves about from place to place quite frequently. It just so happens that every time anyone ever encounters him, he's chilling out in his little hidey hole. The reason for his teeth being so gammy and like the average British resident is definitely because he drinks like an Irishman who's, well, an Irishman, but also because of his sketchy diet. You see, Earl had lived and managed a scrapyard for years, which, as you know, contained scrap, mostly consisting of metal. Doors, cars, car doors, hinges for doors, you get the idea. Well, we eventually learn from Scooter that Earl ate one of his cars once. The whole with a fork. So the chances that Earl was snacking on a bit of 2x4 bit of sheet metal in between meals isn't beyond the scope of reality. He isn't called Crazy Earl for no reason, right? Why live in a closed-off shack with a massive reinforced door, though? What makes him live this kind of sedentary lifestyle, apart from the whole crazy part coming up again? Well, there's a few reasons. One of them is tied up to the map of Earl's scrapyard and the way it's working once the Vault Hunters turn up. Considering it's called Earl's Scrapyard, you would think that he would be heavily involved in its running, making sure things are going smoothly and people aren't coming in and causing trouble, but that's literally the exact opposite of what is happening when you first meet him. Bandits have completely taken over and are terrorizing the area, stealing Earl's food, his pet skag, his explosives, which he loves so dearly, and more importantly, one of the key fragments to the vault that Patricia Tannis had given to him. Why she did this, no idea. Most likely to make sure that all the fragments were scattered in places no one would think to look. But how she convinced Earl to do this? No idea. But it has been linked to some kind of sexual act involving underwear, as mentioned in Tannis' Day 653 journal entry. Knowing the Tannis we know now, that's out of character. But Tannis back then, she would and could have done many strange things, so I don't know, it was kind of in character for her then, I guess. Earl was definitely running his scrapyard in a somewhat normal manner before he acquired the vault fragment from Tannis, living a somewhat normal life for anyone on Pandora. It's only when bandit leader Crom found out about Earl's possession of the vault fragment that things went sour, leading him to bunker up and settle down to avoid being killed by the heaps of Crom's bandits that decided to invade the area in search of the fragment. About a year after this, the Vault Hunters arrive, also looking for the vault fragment that Earl possessed. He tells them to go to Treacher's Landing to get him some booze, and they can have the alien what's it from him. After returning with the moonshine Earl asked for, he says, "Thanks for the booze. Now, about that alien whatever the hell. Funny story, Crom heard about it and stopped by about a year ago. Gave me an offer I couldn't refuse. Why do you think I barricaded myself in here? I don't know why he wanted it, but I wasn't about to argue. That's the last I saw of it." Earl, still trapping himself in his little bunker shacky thing, gets the Vault Hunters to go on a few more errands for him, such as getting him his favourite food of all time, canned skag meat. No, not skag in a can, canned food for skags, but to be fair, knowing Pandora, it's probably the same thing. He also gets them to try and find his pet skag Scrappy, who they end up killing. Earl never learns about this, however, and still looks for him years later, whilst the people who literally murdered him are running the town he lives in. Normal. Anyway, that's the last you see of Earl for the rest of the game, with him probably only escaping after the events of the first game and Crom's bandits decide to move out of his scrapyard. Even though the only reason he originally hid behind a reinforced door at his shack was because he was scared of Crom and his bandits, after all of Borderlands 1 he decides to move to Pandora's moon Elpis, and more specifically its capital city Concordia, where he does the same thing? Yeah, from this point, Earl must have just been so mentally distraught and used to living in such conditions that it's now become a part of him, fully embracing the whole hiding behind a door in a bunker or shack or ship lifestyle. Or is it to do with that entirely? Now, you may be asking, how does Earl get all his food, all his supplies, all his drink, all the stuff Vault Hunters of all people need? Well, it has something to do with the new and enhanced EchoNet. the black market. Earl's shop, moving forward, is very famously referred to as Earl's Black Market, and I can almost guarantee that he's not just calling it that for shits and gigs. He's 100% involved in underground trading ventures, and is the reason he always requests rare, hard-to-find materials such as moonstone or iridium in exchange for extremely sought-after, almost impossibly found items. That's the reason at this point why he hides in secret, constantly moves from place to place and keeps his true identity hidden. For all we know, Earl could be the coveted top dog of the EchoNet black market and not just a keen trader. I mean, he definitely gets enough from Vault Hunters to take that title. Plus, apart from the illustrious Seraph vendors, he seems to have a monopoly situation going on, especially considering the Seraph traders have gone all but extinct at this point. Is that Earl's doing? There is one market, however, that's been popping up recently. After years of the Seraph vendors going missing, someone called Maurice seemed to set up a black market, and this pop-up shop offers much competition for Earl and really establishes that there's a lot of underground trading routes and dodgy dealings going on under everyone's noses. Getting a bit deep there, none of this is actually confirmed, at least not in the way I said it, but it proves there's more than meets the eye with Earl. More than what he's letting on. And that's kind of it in terms of the fundamentals of Earl's character. After the events of the pre-sequel, he decides to move back to Pandora and to the town of Sanctuary. And it's worth noting that Earl living in Concordia, then Sanctuary, must be the first time he wasn't completely isolated from the outside world. I mean, yes, he quite literally is isolated, but he was at least living in cities with people living in, as opposed to some junkyard in the middle of nowhere. It doesn't mean much, but it does add credence to the whole black market aspect of his character, especially where he was located in Concordia, sort of out of the way in a back alley. After moving to Sanctuary, he pretty much performs the same role he did on Elpis, being a pure black market dealer, though accepting iridium instead of moonstones for pretty obvious reasons. The only part of the story he makes a fundamental impact in is when he sells the Vault Hunters a fuel cell needed to power Sanctuary, but other than that, he stays purely as a black market vendor. During the fight for Sanctuary near the end, Earl's place is completely abandoned by him and his stash is completely left over, containing piles and piles of iridium that he just abandoned, as well as a singular chair, a few cans of beer, and a pizza box. He's just like me for real. Where did Earl go though? Well, turns out that him and Marcus, of all people, decided to flee to a bunker in the Dahl Abandon, well away from the rest of the Crimson Raiders. With Earl being by himself for so long, he started to get sick and tired of Marcus pretty quickly. Earl pleaded with the Vault Hunters to get Marcus out of there, as he hates this little wet pants crybaby. After the Vault Hunters beat up and break one of Marcus's machines, Marcus finally decides to leave, much to the approval of both Earl and Marcus. After this, Earl decides to stay in the bunker until the newest Sanctuary, Sanctuary 3, had been fully assembled, and joins the rest of the Crimson Raiders moving forward. Earl's black market completely changes in Borderlands 3. With Marcus and Earl living together for some time, Marcus seemingly gets the amazing idea of stealing Earl's business of selling SDUs and taking it for himself, but for cold hard cash instead of hard to find materials like iridium or moonstone, meaning Earl was forced into finding another way of making his black market ends meet. He finally decided on fashion, selling weapon skins, character outfits and heads that they could wear, still for that elusive iridium. He also got his revenge on Marcus, stealing one of his gun vending machines and rebranding it as his own, taking all of its profits for himself. The bunker Earl has in Sanctuary 3 is very clearly purpose-built, being forged into the construction of the actual ship, which is weird. But I guess the Crimson Raiders all knew he was an asset, so probably did that to please him. It's a much larger reinforced door this time, being more of a secured facility door than some random house one. It's covered in different writings, such as saying Iridium Shards Only, All Sales Final at the top, Knock for Service on the side, how he spelt knock right but for wrong, I'll never understand, and has a no entry written at the bottom, with two massive chains stretching across the doorway entrance, both padlocked. The only part that remains the same is the little slit in the middle of the door, where Earl once again pops his little head out of nowhere when you're buying stuff. The newest addition to Earl's market is the Crazy Earl's reroll board to the right of Earl's bunker, allowing anyone to come down and change the anointments on their guns. It's only a gameplay thing, but it does show the slow expansion of Earl's business, which is really cool to see. Now, in Borderlands 4, as you probably know, Sanctuary 3 crash landed, and Earl is nowhere to be seen in the game. Well, not as normal Earl is in any way. Spoilers, by the way. Whilst he isn't in the base game at all, Crazed Earl appears as a boss in Ellie and the Vault of the Damned DLC as some sort of weird thresher, human, snake, serpent type creature with way too many teeth for Earl, but he's still got the mustache, so that's cool. He is initially your normal Earl, who's housed in the greenhouse of a person called Daphne and is refusing to leave. After Daphne comes up with a gas that could persuade Earl to leave the said greenhouse, she gets the Vault Hunters to release it and see what happens. As it turns out, Earl ended up turning into a giant monster called Crazed Earl and has to be killed by the Vault Hunters. Now, is this canon? Unfortunately, yes. But listen, after defeating Crazed Earl, Ellie says, "Oh, that'll happen, we've had to put him down before," implying that Earl's been killed before and has to come back somehow. And also the sheer casual nature of which she says this implies he will be back again at some time in the future. So what? My guess is they have just given up on any continuity, and this whole thing was just an excuse to fight a well-known character and brush it off as some sort of joke that he can be brought back later. And so you don't really think much of it when he comes back, and that's fine, I guess, but it's handled in such a shoddy way compared to other times Gearbox has pulled that off. Why make the story canon if you're going to do something like this? Why not make it all a dream sequence like Claptrap's pre-sequel DLC or Krieg's Borderlands 3 DLC? Or a story told by someone that doesn't actually happen, like Fight for Dragon's Keep or Claptrap's Robot Revolution in the first game. It's just weird to me. I mean, Marcus literally dies in the first game, at the hands of Claptrap, no less. But the DLC was very clearly non-canon. You kill loads of people that are already dead and they just come back to life and you kill them again. And it's just brushed off as it's not canon, so it's fine, it's just a little bit of fun. But this whole thing with Ellie's DLC in Borderlands 4, it's considered actually canon. Bad decision, in my opinion anyway. Crazy Earl is a character that's definitely memorable, and though he pretty much only served as a vendor in most instances, it was a really interesting way to fit him and the overarching black market into the universe. Though he was probably not planned to return in the second game at first, and definitely not as this whole black market Iridium vendor shebang. I'm guessing the devs saw how popular of a character he was, or just really wanted to bring him back for one reason or another, and decided, fuck it. It was a nice running reference throughout all the games that you had this crazy little mustache dude hiding behind a doorway in the middle of town, or in the back alleyway on the moon, trading some of the rarest acquisitions on the planet for what is essentially considered purple crack, just to leave it in a pile in the corner and eat pizza next to it. I love you, Earl. Only appearing in Borderlands 1 and having a small reference to her in the beginning of Borderlands 2, Helena Pierce isn't exactly the most memorable or thought of person when looking back at the large cast of characters we have in the franchise now, but she is still a very important one when it comes to the overall story and the betterment of many other people involved in it, whether that's the typical townsfolk or Roland himself. Technically being the first ever character you see in Borderlands history, Helena Pierce, or at least her character model, would appear in the very first Borderlands trailer ever released to the public in 2008, which was later found on a DVD given out in issue 97 of Xbox's official magazine. Being known as the Borderlands before cell shading, this trailer shows off a very different version of Borderlands than what we have come to know today, but has a few similar aspects, most notably the character model shown off. Helena is the most famous of all these, of course for being the only character voiced in the trailer, and also being pretty much exactly like how she would turn out in the first game, voice actor, clothes and all. This trailer has become pretty well known in the Borderlands fandom for being where it all started, but also because it truly shows how different the concept for the original game was compared to what we eventually got and what has come since. Now, let's get to Helena herself. At first glance, she is a very generic looking character, with a brown colour palette and simple clothes, akin to most other residents in New Haven. She wears simple combat gear, including light brown khaki pants, a zip-up gilet, and a black fur collar coat. Looking closer, you can see a few standout features however. The most obvious one is the left side of her face and her eye, with it looking to be heavily scarred, almost melted in appearance, and being slumped down. Her eye suffering from leukocoria, being fully white, with a good guess her vision from said eye has completely faded at this point. The reason for her heavy scarring is due to a ring that her now deceased husband had given to her, a skag pearl ring. This ring gave off ravenous hunger-inducing pheromones that would make skags feel an extreme appetite and cause them to act out in a gluttonous rage. This led to her being attacked, mauled, and permanently scarred because of this. This also explains her other standout standout part, the robotic left arm she possesses, which is almost certainly caused by the same skags that scarred her face. Now, it's unknown whether her husband accidentally or purposefully gave her this ring, knowing it would admit such a horrible fate to Helena, but considering he was long dead by the time we meet Helena for the first time, it could have been a genuine accident and he suffered for it. Perhaps he was also at the same skag attack that Helena survived and he didn't get so lucky, but we have no concrete proof. It's always okay to speculate though. Now, in terms of the actual background of Helena Pierce and who she is as a person, not much, or rather nothing at all is known, apart from the previously talked about occurrence. She's first met in New Haven, very clearly being the leader of the town and managing its upkeep. She's first heard over the comms around the town, relaying information about a tough decision she had to make. I'm transmitting to inform you that I have made a decision I think you won't like. As administrator of New Haven, I am responsible for the well-being of its citizens, and in that capacity, I must keep the road to Sanctuary closed for now. Baron Flint's tribe and that infernal contraption of theirs are out on the salt flats, and I don't want citizens getting hurt trying to get past them. As the Vault Hunters rock up to the front of the gate, Helena comes on the comms again, this time relaying information directly to them. You've got some nerve, Vault Hunter, strutting into New Haven like the world owes you something. Well, I've got news for you. You pull your own weight here, or you die. Before I lift one finger to help you on your mad quest to the vault, you're going to do something for me. The last electrical storm blew out New Haven's power grid. Scooter tells me the equipment is fixed now, but someone needs to go and reactivate all the power generators. That's where you come in. She doesn't take to strangers well and makes them prove their worth before allowing them to enter the town. From the role she takes, it's a pretty good guess to say that she has personally oversaw the construction of New Haven after the original town of Haven, now Old Haven, was ransacked and taken over by the Crimson Lance, meaning she takes a very heavy stance on community and keeping a civilized society built up, even if that means fleeting and regrouping, rather than taking the fight directly to Atlas. After the Vault Hunters provide much needed power to the town, she takes a less confrontational approach to them, letting them in her office and organising a way to take the fight back to the Lance, and more specifically, Commandant Steele and the Vault, even if she doesn't agree with it herself, referring to it as a mad pursuit. She ends up directing the Vault Hunters to Patricia Tannis, who is of more help in understanding how the Vault works and how to find one more piece. Helena then calls upon the Vault Hunters to investigate her previous town of Old Haven after seeing a bunch of smoke signals rising up in droves, which she believes to be from bandits. As they are locked out of the Echo Net, this is bandits' only way of communicating, and Helena wants them to find out what's really going on and to put a stop to it. After finding out the Crimson Lance had actually killed all the bandits responsible for the signals and are now using the town as bait to lure more bandits, Helena communicates to shut it all down. She became concerned that Vault Hunters being a part of New Haven now and being seen at the Old Town will push Commandant Steele to attack New Haven next, as if any Atlas personnel managed to relay that information back to her, she would see that as an attack by Helena and the New Haven residents. After the town is cleared out and the smoke signals were extinguished, Helena set her sights for Baron Flint. Baron Flint was a bandit leader with a final piece of the Vault Key, but more importantly for Helena was the one major obstacle getting in the way between New Haven and Sanctuary, completely cutting them off from each other and becoming a danger for anyone who decided to take the long journey to travel there, or anywhere near there to be honest. The Vault Hunters took the long and perilous journey to confront and kill Flint and his bandits, who sit atop a large piece of mining equipment called Thor. They of course kill him and get the final piece, but everything takes a final turn for Helena when she can't get hold of anyone in Sanctuary, and Tannis has seemingly gone missing. What the hell is going on? Has Steele gone insane? They're shutting down the ecosystem, and now we're getting reports of weapon fire all around Sanctuary. It's a war zone. Sanctuary's getting pounded out there. They are sending distress signals to anyone who'll listen, but if they shut down Echo, I'll be unable to... With the ecosystem down, Sanctuary being attacked with no way to call for help, and Tannis missing, it all looked hopeless for Helena. But luckily the Vault Hunters were able to find Tannis locked up in a cell, only to find out she had betrayed Helena and the Vault Hunters. Tannis had given up the Vault Key to the Crimson Lance and Commandant Steele, essentially solidifying the Lance's victory and opening the vault once and for all. Obviously we know why Tannis did this now, go back and listen to my Tannis segment if you can't remember, but it's still a gut punch. Helena isn't aware of any of this yet though, as the entire ecosystem is still down. As Tannis created it, she brushes past her betrayal and keenly instructs the Vault Hunters on how to bring the whole thing back online. It's probably impossible to take back the Vault Key or open the vault now. Let's focus on something else instead. Let's bring the ecosystem back online. The Lance locked it down, but I know how we can bring it back, since I pretty much invented it. I wrote some instructions on the back of this paper towel. Find the Echo command console and follow my instructions. After this, you pretty much never hear from Helena Pierce again, unless obviously you go visit her in New Haven after the fact, but in terms of the main story, it sort of hits a brick wall for her right there. It moves from her to Tannis, and then it's just the Vault Hunters and the Vault itself at the end, which is weird, to say the least. You can see why people continuously criticize Borderlands 1's story now, because it had great foundations, but things like that just piss me off. You just never hear from Helena again. Nothing about Sanctuary being attacked, nothing about Tannis and betraying you, about the vault being opened, nothing. It's like as soon as the EchoNet went offline, she just developed heavy Alzheimer's and forgot about literally everything she was talking about and was concerned about in the first place. Well, we can all just assume that Helena was too busy dealing with Sanctuary after the Echo network came back online, and she wasn't even thinking about the vault. After the Destroyer was killed, she found out about the whole Tannis betrayal thing and Atlas opening the vault, Commandant Steele dying, etc., and had mixed feelings. But that's just the weak it all happened off-screen argument that people try and use and justify bad writing, so I'm not even going to try. Either way. After this and the events of the secret army of General Knox, Helena Pierce and the rest of New Haven felt peace for a while due to Atlas's abandonment of the planet, but that didn't last very long. A few years later, a new interplanetary megacorporate threat emerged: Hyperion. New Haven was promptly invaded after Jack and Wilhelm found out that this was the town that Roland used to live in and Lilith still did, with Crimson Raiders still operating from it. After the events of the pre-sequel, Jack hated Roland but despised Lilith, with him wanting them and anyone affiliated with them killed. Whilst Roland was the sole leader of Sanctuary, Helena and Lilith were the leaders of New Haven and would keep in contact frequently about ongoing operations out in the Rust Commons. But when Wilhelm invaded the town and started burning everything down left, right and centre, all communications were lost between the two settlements. The entire town of New Haven was eviscerated, with everyone seemingly dead. Lilith barely survived the ordeal and was presumed dead by Jack for years, but Helena vanished off the face of the planet, not being heard of or seen ever again. Speculation was to be had about her disappearance, but no one knew it truly for years. It was only when 6 new Vault Hunters crashed near the town of Liarsburg out in the tundra years later that any answers were found. It turns out that Helena and a few New Haven residents managed to escape from New Haven and hijack a Hyperion express train, but were quickly found by Jack and Wilhelm. Upon being confronted by Helena, Jack quickly makes a remark about her looks and mocks her for looking like she headbutted a belt sander after she said how her malformed face came to be and that the husband who gave it to her passed away. Jack promptly shot her in the head and ordered the execution of the remaining New Haven massacre survivors, bringing a final end to Helena Pierce and New Haven as a whole. The train was destroyed and the remains of her body were never found, leading to a lasting mystery behind her disappearance. It turns out that the echo logs were found by these new Vault Hunters, recorded by passengers of the train, leading to the final closure on Helena's story. Though not someone as memorable as many other characters here, she still had her impact on the Borderlands franchise, and I truly believe she would have become one of the greats if they managed to fit her character into Borderlands 2. I would have loved to see how she fits into the narratives behind different stories moving forward, so it's a shame they just killed her off. I get why though. It really shows that Jack does not give a fuck. You've got the leader of the Resistance, someone you assume would have a major role in the second game after finishing the first, and she literally gets shot in the face by the main antagonist without a thought like 20 minutes into the game. I still hate the way it happens, but if Gearbox felt that was the way she should have gone, or felt there was nothing else to do with the character, then what am I to say to that? Would have been cool to see, or at least hear from her in the pre-sequel at least though. Anyway, rest in peace, Helena. Hey, it's me. Just want to say thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I appreciate it if you made it all the way through the video. If you just wanted to watch about one specific character, I understand, but yeah, just wanted to insert this little bit at the end to say once again, thank you for watching, and I do hope you guys enjoyed. There will obviously be more parts to this, but I hope you guys can understand why I decided to split it up into these parts as opposed to just including them all in one video. It's 2 hours, over 2 hours and 10 minutes, so it's a pretty long video to do, and I did think that if I did it all as one video, it would have been too long personally, not just because the actual video length itself would be probably over 6 hours, but also I just think that it makes more sense to have 3 separate videos, and then if you guys really care, I will put them all into one mega compilation at some point. Also, you probably noticed, if you're a keen-eye viewer, that all of these characters that were in this video are from Borderlands 1 onwards, and I just thought that would make more sense. Then I did also think that someone like Moxxi, for example, is obviously going to have a really, really long backstory, and is going to have like half an hour on her, because she is in every single Borderlands game, but Defiant Calder or Rush, or even Lorelei from Borderlands 3, they aren't going to be as long, because they are only in one game. There's just not a lot of lore on them, so these future videos, part 2 and part 3, will probably be including multiple games, as some people might only have a 5-minute segment on them or a 10-minute segment on them, but I just thought that that would make more sense. So hopefully you do understand. But other than that, I do hope you have an amazing day or night, depending on what you're doing currently whilst watching this video and listening to me ramble about random stuff. Some people like playing Borderlands in the background, some people like listening to me whilst going to sleep. And if you're getting to this point in the video, cue something else. The video's ending. If you're not asleep by now, you're going to have to put something else on. I'm sorry. But yeah, see you guys in a bit. Have a good one.